Pretending to be bankrupt, I begged my own flesh and blood for shelter while rain soaked my rags. My rich son threw $200 in the mud and told security to toss me out like trash to protect his political campaign. He did not know I secretly owned the very ground he stood on. He did not know that in my pocket I carried a phone that could bankrupt him in seconds. But the real shock came later when my youngest son, a poor teacher living in the slums, sold his wedding ring just to buy me medicine. That decision changed everything. Next morning, my lawyer arrived with a $55 million check, and my ungrateful children were left with absolutely nothing. My name is Jefferson Carter. I am 68 years old. To the world, I look like a washed-up old man who lost his way. But few know I founded Carter Logistics and owned a third of the industrial warehouses on the East Coast. Let me tell you how I lost my family to find the only son worth a damn. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to test the loyalty of those you love. The rain tramped down on Atlanta as if it wanted to wash away the sins of the city, but it could not wash away the disgust on my son Terrence's face. I stood there shivering in a khaki coat I had bought at a thrift store for $5. It smelled of mold and damp earth. Behind the gilded iron gates of the $5 million estate, the warm glow of crystal chandeliers spilled out onto the wet driveway. I could hear the smooth notes of a jazz band and the clinking of expensive crystal glasses. It was a symphony of wealth. Terrence, my eldest son, was hosting a fundraising gala for his city council campaign. He stood right on the marble steps holding a glass of red wine, wearing a bespoke Armani suit that probably cost more than my first car. Through the French windows he saw me. The social smile on his lips vanished instantly, replaced by a look of pure horror. He did not run out to open the gate for his father. He signaled to the large security guard standing in the booth. The gate buzzed open. I stepped inside, intending to call his name, but Terrence rushed out the front door. He did not come to greet me. He came to intercept me. He stopped me before I could even set foot on the porch. His hand clamped around my thin arm with a grip so tight I felt my old bones ache. He dragged me forcefully away from the main entrance, pulling me toward the dark shadows of the side garage. "What the hell are you doing here?" Terrence hissed through clenched teeth, his eyes darting around frantically to see if any VIP guests had witnessed the scene. "Look at you. Are you trying to destroy the most important night of my career?" I let my body slump, making myself look smaller and frailer. I forced my voice to tremble, playing the role I had designed for this night. "Terrence, son." I wheezed, forcing a wet cough. "I am sorry. I have nowhere else to go. The bank took the old house today. I was scammed, son. They took my retirement fund. They took everything. I am hungry. I just need a place to sit for a while. Just a bowl of hot soup, please." Terrence took a step back as if I were carrying a contagious disease. He raised a manicured hand to cover his nose, his face wrinkling in revulsion at the smell of wet wool and poverty that radiated from me. "Come inside? Are you insane?" He snapped, his cold voice cutting through the sound of the rain. "In there is the state senator. In there are business tycoons and the press. Do you think I can let them see the father of candidate Terrence Carter looking like a homeless junkie? My opponents would use a picture of you to kill my campaign by tomorrow morning." I looked him in the eye, letting the rain drip from my brimmed hat onto his polished Italian leather shoes. "But I am your father," I said softly. "I raised you. I sold my first delivery truck 30 years ago so you could attend that prestigious law school. Now you cannot give me a sleeping bag in the garage." I brought up that memory not to beg, but to test him. It was a final exam for his conscience. 30 years ago, I worked 16 hours a day lifting heavy crates until my back gave out, just so Terrence would never have to wear second-hand clothes to school. I built the foundation he was standing on today. But Terrence did not flinch. He did not show a flicker of emotion. He let out a scoff, a cruel sound that revealed his true nature. "That is ancient history, old man, and do not bring up that raggedy truck again. It only reminds me of how low my background is. I have spent 10 years scrubbing the stench of poverty from my resume. I cannot let you drag me back into the mud." He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a crocodile skin wallet. His fingers grabbed a random wad of cash. He did not even bother to count it. Here, Terrence threw the bills onto the oil-stained concrete floor of the garage. The $20 bills scattered, fluttering down into the puddles of dirty water. "That is about $200. It is enough for you to rent a cheap motel room and buy food for a few days. Take it and get out of here immediately. Do not ever show your face in this neighborhood again. If reporters ask you, tell them you are an old gardener. I fired. Do not ever say you are my father." I looked down at the money soaking in the grease and water. $200. That was the price he placed on fatherhood. That was the value of 40 years of sacrifice. I did not bend down. I did not pick it up. I straightened my spine, standing as tall as my disguise would allow. "You are chasing your father away in a storm like this?" I asked one last time, my voice no longer trembling with cold, but with a suppressed fury he failed to notice. "Are you not afraid of karma, Terrence?" "The only karma here is your poverty," Terrence said, turning his back to me, adjusting his silk bow tie. "You failed because you were not smart enough. Do not blame fate. Security." The massive guard jogged over, his hand resting on his belt. "Get this old man off the property immediately," Terrence ordered without looking back. "If he loiters around here, use your baton. I will take full responsibility." The guard grabbed my shoulder, shoving me hard out from the shelter of the garage overhang. I stumbled and fell onto the wet asphalt of the driveway. Mud splattered across my face and hands. Terrence did not turn around. He walked quickly back into the warmth of his mansion, slamming the heavy oak door shut. The music inside swelled again, drowning out the sound of the rain. I slowly picked myself up. My knees ached, but my resolve was harder than steel. I left the $200 on the floor. I let it lie there, drifting toward the sewer drain exactly where it belonged. I looked up at the second-floor window where a warm, golden light spilled out. I saw Terrence's silhouette raising a toast with powerful men. He was laughing. He thought he had just solved a minor nuisance. He did not know that the real trouble of his life had just begun. This mansion, this land, and even the investment fund he bragged about building with his own hands were all assets listed under Carter Logistics. I was the silent chairman. I had let him put his name on the management papers, but the ultimate ownership remained with me. I reached into the deep pocket of my wet coat and pulled out an old Nokia phone. To anyone watching, it looked like a useless brick, but inside it housed an encrypted satellite communication system connected directly to my legal team. I pressed a small button on the side marking my current GPS coordinates. Target 1 failed. I turned my back on the house and began the long walk down the driveway. Terrence had been removed from my will. He had signed his financial death warrant the moment he threw that money in the mud. But I still had 2 more children. Vanessa, my second daughter, lived 5 miles away in a penthouse downtown. Her husband, Greg, was a white man who always carried an air of superiority. I needed to know if the rot had spread to the entire family tree. I dragged my feet toward the bus stop. Tonight would be a long night. Next stop, the luxury apartment of Vanessa Carter. The bus ride took 40 minutes. I sat in the back, dripping water onto the floor, ignoring the stares of the other passengers. I used the time to rehearse my story. I needed to be convincing. I needed to look desperate. When I arrived at the high-rise building where Vanessa lived, the doorman tried to stop me. I had to use the intercom to call up. "Delivery for Mrs. Wright," I lied. My voice raspy. When the elevator opened onto the penthouse floor, the smell of expensive lavender and sanitized air hit me. I walked to the door and knocked. Greg opened it. He was wearing a casual polo shirt that probably cost $300. He took one look at me and his nose wrinkled. He immediately pulled a can of air freshener from a nearby table and sprayed it in my direction. "What is that smell?" Greg said loud enough for Vanessa to hear. Vanessa walked into the hallway wearing a silk robe. When she saw me standing there soaking wet and dirty, her eyes went wide, but not with concern. "Dad!" she shrieked. "You are dripping on my Persian rug. Do you know that cost $10,000? Get off it. Move to the tile." She did not ask why I was wet. She did not ask why I looked like a beggar. She cared about the rug. I stepped onto the cold tile. "Vanessa," I said, keeping my head down, "I am in trouble. I lost everything. The business failed. The house is gone. I just need a place to sleep tonight. Just the sofa." Vanessa crossed her arms. Her face hardened. The sofa, she laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Greg is hosting a VIP partner meeting here in an hour. We cannot have you on the sofa smelling like a wet dog. You will ruin the aesthetic." "But I have nowhere else to go," I pleaded. "That is your fault for making bad investments," Greg interjected, stepping forward aggressively. "We are not running a shelter here, Jefferson. You need to leave. Just for tonight," I begged. "It is storming outside." "We cannot take the risk," Vanessa said, checking her watch. "If Greg's partners see you like this, it makes us look bad. It makes us look like we come from trash. You have 5 minutes to leave or Greg calls the police." Greg pulled out his phone. "I am dialing 911 right now. I will tell them an intruder is refusing to leave." "Do not embarrass us, old man." I looked at my daughter. She was checking her makeup in the hallway mirror, completely indifferent to my presence. "So this is it?" I asked quietly. "You are kicking me out." "We are protecting our lifestyle," Vanessa corrected. "Go find a shelter. That is what they are there for." I turned around and pressed the elevator button. As the doors closed, I saw Greg spraying more air freshener where I had stood. They treated me worse than a stray animal. I walked out of the building. The rain had stopped, but the air was freezing. I checked my old Nokia again. Target 2 failed. Vanessa and Greg were out. I had one child left. Jordan, my youngest. He lived on the other side of the city in a neighborhood most people avoided after dark. He was a history teacher at a failing public school. He had married Emily, a white nurse who worked night shifts. They were poor. They struggled. And I had not spoken to them in 6 months because Terrence and Vanessa had told me Jordan was ashamed of me. I caught 2 buses to get to the crumbling apartment complex where Jordan lived. It was nearly midnight. Gunshots echoed in the distance. The streetlights were broken. I walked up the stairs, the paint peeling off the walls. I stood in front of apartment 4B. I knocked. The door opened. Jordan stood there in a worn-out t-shirt. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw me, he did not cover his nose. He did not call security. "Dad," he gasped. He pulled me inside, immediately slamming the door against the cold. "Emily," he called out. "Get a towel. Dad is here." The apartment was tiny, maybe 500 square feet. It smelled of boiled cabbage and old books, but it was warm. Emily came running out of the bedroom. She was 6 months pregnant, her belly swollen. She did not hesitate. She grabbed a towel and started drying my hair. "Dad, what happened?" Jordan asked, guiding me to the only armchair in the room. He moved a stack of graded papers off the seat so I could sit. I told them the same lie. Bankrupt, homeless, nowhere to go. Jordan looked at Emily. They exchanged a look. I expected the rejection. I expected the excuses about having no space or no money. Instead, Emily smiled. "You are staying here," she said. "We do not have much room, but we will make it work." She went to the kitchen. I watched her scrape the bottom of a pot. She heated up a bowl of thin bean soup and brought it to me with a piece of stale bread. "Eat," she said gently. "It is not much, but it is hot." I looked around the room. On the refrigerator, I saw a medical bill for my grandson Leo. Past due. Final notice. $5,000 for asthma medication. I ate the soup. It was the best meal I had ever tasted. That night, they gave me their bed. Jordan and Emily slept on a thin mattress on the living room floor. I lay in the dark, listening to them whisper. "We have enough milk for Leo for 2 more days," Jordan whispered. "I will pick up an extra shift at the hospital next week," Emily replied. "Do not worry about the money. We have to take care of your dad." He looked so broken. "He is not a burden," Emily Jordan said, his voice cracking. "He is my dad." I turned my face into the pillow and let a single tear fall. I had found them. I had finally found the family I thought I had lost. But the test was not over. I needed to be sure. I needed to know how far they would go. The next morning, I enacted the final phase of my plan. I woke up coughing violently, clutching my chest. Dad Jordan was at my side in seconds. "I need my medicine, son," I rasped. "It is a special prescription. It costs $80. I don't have it." Jordan's face fell. He looked at his wallet. It was empty. I knew it was empty. "I will get it, Dad," he said. "Just rest." He put on his jacket and left. I waited 2 minutes, then followed him. I watched from across the street as my son walked into a pawn shop 3 blocks away. I saw him stand at the counter. I saw him struggle to pull the gold wedding band off his finger. It was a thin band, nothing fancy, but it was all he had. I saw the pawnbroker shake his head, offering a low price. Jordan argued, then hung his head and accepted the cash. He walked out, wiping his eyes. He went straight to the pharmacy. When he came back to the apartment, he had a small bottle of pills. They were just vitamins I had switched the labels on, but he didn't know that. "Here, Dad," he said, pouring a glass of water. "Take this." I took the pill. I looked at his hand. "Where is your ring, son?" I asked. Jordan hid his hand behind his back. "Oh, I left it by the sink when I washed the dishes. I forgot to put it back on." He lied to protect my dignity. He sold his marriage symbol to save my life. I swallowed the vitamin. My heart was full, but my mind was sharp. It was time. I excused myself to the bathroom. I locked the door and pulled out the Nokia. I sent a text message to my lawyer, Mr. Braxton. Activate Phase 2, the debt trap. It was time to see if the rot in my other children could be cured or if it had to be cut out completely. I was about to unleash a storm that would tear this family apart to save the only parts worth saving. I flushed the toilet and stepped out. The game was over. The war was about to begin. The bus ride to downtown Atlanta took 45 minutes of pure humiliation. I sat in the back of the city bus, shivering as the air conditioning blasted against my soaked clothes. The other passengers gave me a wide berth. A young mother pulled her child closer to her chest when I coughed. To them, I was just another cautionary tale of what happens when you make bad life choices. They did not know that the man huddling in the corner could buy the entire bus company with a single signature. I kept my head down and focused on the mission. Terrence had failed the test. Now it was Vanessa's turn. Vanessa lived in the Millennium Tower, a glass needle that pierced the sky in the most expensive district of the city. It was a fortress of wealth. When I arrived, the doorman tried to block my path. He looked at my muddy boots and the water dripping from the hem of my khaki coat and shook his head. I had to use the intercom to call up to the penthouse. I deepened my voice and muttered something about a special delivery that required a signature. Curiosity is a powerful tool. Vanessa buzzed me in. The elevator ride was smooth and silent, propelling me upward at a speed that made my ears pop. When the doors slid open onto the 45th floor, I stepped into a private foyer that smelled of expensive lavender and sanitized air. The walls were adorned with abstract art that I knew cost more than most people earned in a year. I walked to the double doors and knocked. My hand left a small smudge of dirt on the pristine white wood. The door opened. Greg stood there. My son-in-law was a tall white man with a perfectly groomed beard and eyes that always seemed to be appraising the value of everything they touched. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that looked soft enough to sleep in. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand. When he saw me, the glass almost slipped from his fingers. His reaction was instantaneous and visceral. He did not say hello. He recoiled. "What is that smell?" Greg choked out, stepping back and covering his nose with his free hand. "Jesus, Jefferson, you smell like a wet dog that has been rolling in garbage." He reached for a can of organic air freshener sitting on a side table and shamelessly sprayed a cloud of citrus mist in my direction. The chemical fog mixed with the smell of my damp wool coat, creating a nauseating combination. "Greg, who is it?" Vanessa called out from deep inside the apartment. She walked into the foyer wearing a silk robe that flowed around her like water. Her hair was wrapped in a towel and her face was covered in a rejuvenating clay mask. When her eyes landed on me, they went wide, but there was no spark of recognition or concern for her father standing there shivering and broken. Her gaze dropped instantly to my feet. "Dad!" she shrieked. Her voice hit a pitch that shattered the quiet elegance of the penthouse. "Look at your boots. You are standing on my Persian rug. Do you have any idea what that cost? That is a $10,000 antique silk rug. Get off it. Get off it right now." She rushed forward, not to hug me, but to shoo me away from her precious floor covering. She pointed frantically to the marble tile near the elevator. "Move," she commanded. I shuffled backwards, stepping onto the cold, hard tile. I looked down at the rug. There were 2 faint, muddy footprints on the intricate red pattern. 2 footprints that mattered more to my daughter than the fact that her father looked like he had crawled out of a gutter. "Vanessa," I said, my voice raspy and weak. "I am sorry about the rug. I truly am. But I am in trouble. Real trouble." Vanessa stopped inspecting the rug and finally looked at me. Her eyes behind the green clay mask were cold and annoyed. "What kind of trouble, Dad?" she asked, crossing her arms. "And why do you look like a homeless person? Is this some kind of midlife crisis costume?" I wish it were. I lied, letting my shoulders slump. "I lost it all, Vanessa. The retirement fund, the house, everything. I was scammed, a bad investment deal. The bank seized the property this afternoon. They locked me out. I have nowhere to go. My pockets are empty." I paused, waiting for the shock to register, waiting for the empathy that surely must exist somewhere inside the child I had rocked to sleep for years. I remembered writing the check for the down payment on this very penthouse. I remembered paying for her business school tuition so she could launch her spa empire. Surely that investment of love and money would yield some return now. Vanessa let out a long, exasperated sigh. She did not step forward to comfort me. She stepped back closer to Greg, forming a united front against my poverty. "I told you this would happen," she said, her voice dripping with condensation. "I told you that you were too trusting with your money. I told you to hire a better financial advisor. But you never listen. You always think you know best. And now look at you. This is just embarrassing. I know I was foolish," I pleaded, playing the part of the defeated old man. "I was stupid. But I am desperate. I just need a place to crash tonight. Just the sofa. I will be gone in the morning. I just need to dry off and get a few hours of sleep." Greg laughed. It was a short, sharp sound like a bark. "The sofa," Greg mocked, gesturing to the white Italian leather sectional visible in the living room. "Jefferson, take a look at yourself. You are covered in filth. If you sit on that sofa, we will have to burn it. We do not run a shelter here. This is a high-end residence." Vanessa nodded in agreement. "Greg is right, Dad. We cannot have you here like this. Besides, Greg is hosting a very important partner meeting in 20 minutes. These are investors from Tokyo. They are coming here to close a deal on the expansion of Greg's firm." She looked me up and down with a sneer. "Imagine what they would think if they walked in and saw you snoring on the couch, smelling like a sewer. It would ruin the aesthetic. It would kill the deal. You are making us look bad just by standing in the foyer." "But I am your father," I whispered, letting the pain in my voice be real. "I have nowhere else to go." "It is cold outside." "That is not our problem," Vanessa snapped. "You are an adult. You made your choices. If you gambled away your retirement, that is on you. We have our own lives to worry about. We have a reputation to maintain. We cannot be dragging dead weight." Dead weight. The words hung in the lavender-scented air. I looked at this woman who I had raised. I saw the greed and the vanity that had consumed her. She did not see a human being in front of her. She saw a stain on her perfect life. I looked at Greg. He was checking his watch, tapping his foot impatiently. "You have 5 minutes. Jefferson," Greg said, his voice dropping to a menacing tone. "The partners will be here any minute. If you are not out of this building, I am calling the police. I will tell them an intruder forced his way in and is refusing to leave. Do not test me. I will have you arrested for trespassing." "You would call the cops on your father-in-law?" I asked quietly. "I would call the cops on anyone who threatens my business," Greg replied, stepping forward and puffing out his chest. "And right now, you are a threat. You are a liability. We do not do charity here. Get out." Vanessa turned her back on me, walking over to a mirror to inspect her face mask. "Just go, Dad," she said dismissively. "Go find a shelter. There are plenty of them downtown. Maybe this will teach you to be smarter with your money next time." I stood there for a moment longer, memorizing this scene. I wanted to etch their cruelty into my mind so I would never have a moment of doubt when the hammer finally fell. They had chosen a rug and a business meeting over my life. They had chosen appearance over substance. "I understand," I said. My voice was no longer trembling. It was flat and cold. "I understand perfectly." I turned around and pressed the elevator button. The doors opened immediately. I stepped inside. As the doors began to close, I saw Greg pull out his phone, probably to call security, just to be sure. Vanessa was still looking at herself in the mirror, rubbing a spot on her chin. They did not look back. The elevator descended. With every floor that passed, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders, the weight of obligation, the weight of trying to save them from themselves. They were gone. The rot was too deep. They were hollowed out by their own selfishness. I walked out of the Millennium Tower and into the night. The city lights blurred around me. I reached into my deep coat pocket and pulled out the old Nokia phone. The screen glowed green in the darkness. I opened the contact list and scrolled past Vanessa's name. I did not delete it yet. I wanted her to be reachable for the finale. But mentally, I crossed her off the list of my heirs. Target 2 failed. I stood on the street corner. The wind cut through my wet clothes, but I hardly felt it. My anger was a furnace keeping me warm. I had one card left to play, one last hope. Jordan. My youngest son lived on the other side of the tracks in a neighborhood where the police sirens were the background music. He was a history teacher at a crumbling public school. He had married Emily, a white woman who worked as a nurse on the graveyard shift. Terrence and Vanessa mocked Jordan constantly. They called him the failure of the family. They told me he was ashamed of my success and that was why he stayed away. I had not spoken to him in 6 months because I believed their lies. I checked the GPS on the phone. The bus route to Jordan's apartment involved 2 transfers and a long walk through a dangerous district. It was almost midnight. I put the phone away and started walking toward the bus stop. If Jordan was like the others, I would be truly alone in this world. I would be a man with $500 million and no family. But I had to know. I had to see it for myself. I boarded the bus and sat in the back again. I closed my eyes and prepared for the final act. I prayed that poverty had not corrupted Jordan's heart the way wealth had corrupted his siblings. I prayed that somewhere in that run-down apartment I would find a home. Next stop the slums. Next stop the truth. The midnight bus dropped me off at the corner of Martin Luther King Boulevard and Pine Street. The rain had finally stopped, but the air remained thick with the smell of wet asphalt and impending danger. This was the part of the city that didn't make it onto the postcards. It was a place of broken streetlights and boarded-up windows where the sound of a police siren was as common as a heartbeat. I pulled my collar up around my neck and started walking. My destination was a crumbling brick tenement block 3 streets over, known locally as The Stack. It was where my youngest son, Jordan, lived. I walked past groups of young men huddled on corners, eyeing me with suspicion. They saw an old man in rags and decided I wasn't worth the trouble of robbing. For once, my disguise was my protection. As I walked, I felt a different kind of fear settling in my chest. It wasn't the fear of the streets. It was the fear of what I would find behind Jordan's door. Terrence had thrown money at me to make me leave. Vanessa had threatened me with the police. Jordan was my last hope, but I had not been a good father to him. I had been hard on him. I had pushed him to study business, to be like me, and when he chose history and teaching, I had let my disappointment show. I had let his siblings mock him. I had let 6 months go by without a phone call. If he slammed the door in my face, I would not blame him. I reached the building. The front door lock was broken, hanging off its hinges by a single screw. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage, stale cigarette smoke, and decades of neglect. I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, my knees protesting with every step. The elevator had been out of order since the 90s. I counted the door numbers. 4A, 4B, this was it. The paint on the door was peeling, revealing layers of gray and blue underneath like the rings of a tree that had died long ago. I raised my hand to knock. My knuckles were white. I hesitated. Maybe I should just turn around. Maybe it was better to be alone than to see rejection in the eyes of the one son I had secretly hoped was different. But I had to know. I knocked 3 times. The sound echoed in the quiet hallway. I waited. I heard shuffling footsteps inside. Then the sound of a chain being slid back. The door creaked open. Jordan stood there. He was wearing a white undershirt that had seen better days and a pair of gray sweatpants. He looked exhausted. His eyes were rimmed with red and there were deep lines etched around his mouth that shouldn't be there on a man of 30. He looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. He squinted into the dim hallway light. "Dad," he breathed. He didn't ask why I was there. He didn't ask why I was wet or why I smelled like a wet dog. He didn't look at my rags with disgust. His eyes just widened with shock and then softened with something that looked painfully like relief. "Dad, you are freezing." He reached out and pulled me inside. His grip was firm and warm. He didn't check the hallway for neighbors. He didn't worry about appearances. He just pulled his father out of the cold. "Emily," he called out softly, not wanting to wake the neighbors. "Dad is here. Get a blanket." The apartment was tiny. It was basically one room with a kitchenette in the corner and a small bathroom off to the side. The walls were thin and I could hear the television from the apartment next door. The furniture was mismatched, salvaged from thrift stores or curbsides. But it was clean. It was meticulously clean. Emily came out of the small bedroom. My daughter-in-law was a white woman with pale skin and kind eyes. I knew she worked night shifts as a nurse, but tonight she must have been off. She was heavily pregnant, her belly pressing against her oversized t-shirt. She looked tired too, but when she saw me, her face lit up with genuine concern. "Mr. Carter," she said, rushing over as fast as her pregnancy would allow. "Oh my goodness, look at you, you are soaking wet." She didn't ask questions either. She grabbed a thick knitted blanket from the back of the sofa and wrapped it around my shoulders. She began rubbing my arms, trying to generate heat. "Sit down, Dad," Jordan said, guiding me to a worn-out armchair that had a stack of graded history papers on the seat. He moved the papers to the floor. "Sit, I will make tea." I sat down. The chair groaned under my weight. I looked at them. They were hovering over me like I was a fragile bird they had found in a storm. I lost it all. I lied, my voice raspy. I stuck to the script I had used with Terrence and Vanessa. The business, the house, everything. I was scammed. The bank took it all today. I have nowhere to go. I am sorry to burden you. I waited for the hesitation. I waited for the look exchanged between husband and wife that said, "How are we going to afford this?" I waited for the polite rejection, but it never came. Jordan crouched down in front of me and took my cold, dirty hands in his. "You are not a burden, Dad," he said firmly. "You are family. You will stay here as long as you need to. We don't have much, but what we have is yours." Emily was already in the kitchenette lighting the gas stove with a match because the starter was broken. "I am heating up some soup," she said over her shoulder. "It is bean soup. It is not fancy, but it will warm you up." I looked around the apartment while they busied themselves with caring for me. That was when the reality of their life hit me. On the small kitchen table there was a pile of envelopes. They were not fan mail. They were bills, final notices. I saw a uniform hanging on the back of the door. It wasn't a teacher's suit. It was a delivery driver's jacket with a reflective strip. Jordan saw me looking at it. "I picked up a second job," he said quietly, a hint of shame in his voice. "Teaching doesn't pay enough to cover everything, especially with the baby coming. I do deliveries at night." He was working 2 jobs. He was exhausted, and yet he was apologizing to me. I looked back at the table. On top of the pile of bills was a paper with a red stamp. I squinted to read it. It was a medical invoice from the city hospital. The name on it was Leo Carter, my 5-year-old grandson. Diagnosis, severe asthma. Outstanding balance, $4,000. My heart clenched. I didn't even know Leo was sick. Terrence and Vanessa never mentioned it. Jordan never called to ask for money. He had been carrying this burden alone, working nights driving through dangerous streets to pay for his son's breath while I sat in my mansion counting profits. Emily brought the soup. It was a thin broth with beans and a few pieces of carrot. It was clearly a meal meant to stretch a budget. She placed it in my hands with a piece of bread that was slightly stale but toasted to hide the texture. "Eat, Dad," she said gently. I took a spoonful. It was hot and salty. It tasted better than the steak Greg had probably eaten tonight. I ate it all. I scraped the bowl. They watched me with satisfaction, happy that they could provide this small comfort. "We need to figure out sleeping arrangements," Emily said, rubbing her lower back. "Dad, you take the bedroom," Jordan said immediately. "It is the only real bed we have." "No," I protested. "I cannot do that. You have work tomorrow. Emily is pregnant. I will sleep on the floor. Or the chair." "Absolutely not," Emily said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "You are our guest, and you are our father. You take the bed. Jordan and I will make a pallet on the floor out here. The carpet is soft. We will be fine." I tried to argue, but they wouldn't hear of it. They led me to the small bedroom. In the corner was a small cot where my grandson Leo was sleeping. His breathing was heavy, wheezing slightly. A nebulizer machine sat on the nightstand next to him, silent for now. Jordan pulled back the covers of their double bed. The sheets were faded but smelled of fresh laundry detergent. "Get some rest, Dad," Jordan said. "We will figure everything else out in the morning." He closed the door, leaving me in the semi-darkness with my sleeping grandson. I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress sagged in the middle. I felt like an intruder. I felt like a thief stealing their comfort. But I needed to see this through. I lay down, but I did not sleep. I stared at the cracks in the ceiling illuminated by the street lamp outside. About an hour later, I heard movement in the other room. The walls were paper thin. I could hear every whisper. "Jordan, we only have enough milk for Leo for 2 more days," I heard Emily whisper. Her voice was tight with worry. "I know," Jordan replied, his voice low and soothing. "I pick up my check from the delivery gig on Friday. We can stretch it. I will skip lunch this week. But the asthma medication." Emily's voice cracked. "The pharmacy called. They won't refill the prescription until we pay the deductible. It is $80, Jordan. We don't have $80. There was a silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. I could imagine Jordan running his hands through his hair, a habit he had since he was a boy. "I will figure it out," Jordan whispered. "I have something I can sell." "No, Jordan!" Not that Emily protested. "It is just metal," Jordan said. "Leo needs to breathe, and now Dad is here. We have another mouth to feed. He looks so frail, Em. Did you see his hands? He has been living rough. We can't let him see we are struggling. It would break his heart. He has already lost his pride. We can't take away his peace, too." But you worked so hard for that. Emily was crying now, soft, muffled sobs. It is okay, Jordan comforted her. It is going to be okay. We are together. We have Leo. And now we have Dad. It is a blessing, Em. He is safe. That is what matters. I lay there in the dark and tears streamed down my face, soaking the pillowcase. They were talking about selling things to feed me. They were worried about my pride while they were drowning. Jordan was willing to starve himself to skip lunch just so I could eat. Emily was pregnant, uncomfortable, sleeping on a hard floor, and she was grateful I was safe. This was it. This was the truth I had been searching for. Terrence saw me as a stain on his reputation. Vanessa saw me as dirt on her rug. But Jordan and Emily saw me as a father. They saw a human being worthy of love even when I had nothing to offer them but my hunger. I looked over at little Leo sleeping in his cot, his chest rising and falling with effort. I wanted to wake them up right then. I wanted to tell them that I could buy this entire building and turn it into a palace. I wanted to write a check that would clear their debts and fill their fridge for a lifetime. But I couldn't. Not yet. The test wasn't complete. I needed to see the final act of sacrifice. I needed to see if Jordan would truly go through with it. I needed to know the depth of his character, not just his intentions. I wiped my eyes and formulated the next step of the plan. It would be cruel. It would be the hardest thing I had ever done. But it was necessary to prove to myself and to the world who my son really was. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of my son and his wife sleeping on the floor in the next room. They were the poorest people I knew, and yet tonight they were the richest. They had something Terrence and Vanessa would never understand. Tomorrow I would break their hearts one last time so I could heal them forever. Tomorrow I would ask for the one thing they couldn't afford to give, and if they gave it, I would give them the world. Sunlight filtered through the cracked blinds of the bedroom window, casting long, jagged shadows across the peeling wallpaper. I woke up with a plan already forming in my mind. It was a cruel plan. It was a test that no father should ever have to put his son through. But after what Terrence and Vanessa had done, I needed absolute certainty. I needed to know that Jordan's kindness wasn't just a fleeting impulse of the night. I needed to know if it would survive the harsh light of day and the brutal reality of poverty. I sat up on the edge of the mattress and let out a cough. It started low, a rumble in my chest that I forced into a violent hacking spasm. I bent double, clutching my chest as if my heart were giving out. The sound echoed in the tiny apartment, bouncing off the thin walls. The door flew open instantly. Jordan rushed in, his eyes wide with panic. He was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, the worn-out sweatpants and the undershirt. He hadn't slept. I could tell by the dark bruises under his eyes and the way his hands trembled slightly as he reached for me. "Dad?" he said, his voice thick with fear. "Dad, what is wrong? Can you breathe?" I gasped for air, playing the part of the dying man. "It is the congestion, son. My lungs. They feel like they are on fire. I need the medicine. The one the doctor prescribed before I lost the insurance. It is the only thing that stops the fluid." Jordan looked at me helpless. "What is it called?" "I will go get it." I gave him the name of a generic over-the-counter supplement I had seen at the pharmacy window yesterday, but I made it sound like a rare necessity. I told him it cost $85. $85. I saw the color drain from his face. $85 was a fortune in this apartment. It was the difference between eating for a week and starving. It was the money for Leo's inhaler. It was the rent. Jordan stood up and walked to the kitchen table where his wallet lay next to the stack of unpaid bills. He opened it. I could see from the bedroom that it was empty. Not a single bill. He checked the pockets of his delivery uniform. Nothing. He looked at the jar on top of the fridge where they kept loose change. It was nearly empty. Emily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her lower back. She looked at Jordan, then at the empty wallet. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The silence in the room was heavy with their desperation. "I will be right back," Jordan said, turning to me with a forced smile that broke my heart. "Just try to breathe shallow, Dad. I am going to the pharmacy. Do not worry about the money. I have a stash." He was a terrible liar, but he was a wonderful son. He grabbed his keys and a jacket and bolted out the door. I waited exactly 60 seconds. Then I threw off the blanket. My cough vanished. I moved with the agility of a man who had built an empire from scratch, not the frail old beggar I was pretending to be. I pulled on my boots and slipped out of the apartment, locking the door quietly behind me. I caught sight of him at the end of the block. He was walking fast, his head down, his hands shoved deep into his pockets against the morning chill. I followed him, keeping my distance, blending into the rhythm of the neighborhood. The streets were waking up. Metal grates were rolling up on storefronts. People were shuffling to bus stops, their faces hard and closed off. Jordan didn't go to the pharmacy. Not yet. He turned left onto 5th Street. I knew what was on 5th Street. It was a row of predatory businesses that fed on the desperation of the poor. Payday loan sharks, check-cashing joints with exorbitant fees, and pawn shops. My heart sank as I watched him stop in front of a place called Fast Cash Gold and Pawn. The windows were barred with thick iron cages. The sign was faded yellow, peeling in the sun. It was a place where dreams went to die, where family heirlooms were traded for a few days of survival. Jordan stood outside the door for a long moment. I hid behind a parked delivery truck and watched him. He looked at his left hand. He twisted the gold band on his ring finger. It was a simple ring. Thin. Nothing flashy. I remembered when he bought it. He had worked double shifts all summer during college to afford it for Emily. It wasn't worth much in the grand scheme of the diamond market, but to him, it was everything. It was his promise, his dignity. He took a deep breath that I could see shudder through his body. Then he pushed the door open and walked in. I moved closer. I pulled my hat low and stood near the window, pretending to look at a display of dusty guitars and used power tools. Through the grime on the glass, I had a clear view of the counter. The pawnbroker was a heavy man with grease-stained fingers and eyes that had seen too much misery to care. He didn't even look up from his magazine when Jordan approached. "Can I help you?" the man grunted. Jordan placed his hands on the glass counter. His voice was muffled through the window, but I could hear the tremor in it. "I need to sell this." He pulled the ring off. It resisted for a second, as if it didn't want to leave him. It left a pale tan line on his finger, a ghost of the metal that had been there for 5 years. He placed it on the black velvet tray. The pawnbroker picked it up. He didn't treat it with respect. He treated it like scrap metal. He put a jeweler's loupe to his eye and squinted. He weighed it on a small digital scale. He scratched it against a stone to test the gold. Every movement was clinical, cold, and dismissing. 10 carat, the man said, dropping the ring back onto the tray. "It is light. Gold is down this week. It is worth more than that," Jordan argued, his voice rising slightly. "I paid $400 for it." The pawnbroker laughed. A dry hacking sound. "Retail price ain't street price, kid. You bought the sentiment. I am buying the metal. I will give you $60. 60. Jordan looked like he had been punched. "I need at least 90. It is for medicine. Please, it is for my father." The man shrugged. "Not my problem. 60 is the offer. Take it or leave it." I watched my son. I saw the war waging inside him. He could walk away. He could keep his ring. He could come back and tell me he couldn't find the money. No one would blame him. He had a child on the way. He had bills. He had every right to be selfish. But Jordan didn't walk away. He looked at the ring one last time. He looked at the empty space on his finger. He thought about the old man coughing in his bed. 70, Jordan pleaded. "Just 70. Please." The pawnbroker sighed as if he were doing the world a favor. 65. "And that is because I am in a good mood." "Done," Jordan whispered. The man counted out the bills. 3 20s and a 5. Dirty, wrinkled cash. Jordan took it. He didn't look back at the ring. He turned and walked out of the shop, his head hanging low, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I pulled back into the shadows of an alleyway as he passed. He walked right by me, less than 5 feet away. I saw the tears in his eyes. He wiped them away angrily, refusing to let the world see him cry. He was broken, but he was moving. He walked straight to the pharmacy on the corner. I waited until he went inside. Then I walked into the pawn shop. The bell on the door jingled. The pawnbroker looked up, annoyance written all over his face. "We are closed for buying right now," he started to say. I slapped $500 onto the glass counter, a crisp, clean stack of bills. "That ring you just bought," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "The gold band. Put it in a box. Now." The man looked at the money. He looked at me. He saw the rags, but he also saw the look in my eyes. It was the look of a man who owned the building he was standing in. He didn't ask questions. He put the ring in a small cardboard box and slid it across the counter. I took the ring and the receipt. I left the money. I walked back to the apartment, taking a shortcut through the alleyways to beat him home. I slipped back inside, locked the door, and dove under the covers just as I heard his key in the lock. Jordan entered the apartment. He was out of breath. He was holding a small white paper bag from the pharmacy. Inside was a bottle of the expensive vitamins I had asked for disguised as medicine. "Dad," he called out softly, coming into the bedroom. "Dad, I got it." I sat up, feigning weakness. I reached out with a shaking hand. "Thank you, son," I wheezed. "You are a lifesaver." He poured a glass of water from the tap and handed me the pill. I took it. I looked at him. I looked at his hands. He was trying to keep his left hand hidden in his pocket, but he needed it to steady the glass. I saw the pale line where the ring used to be. It stood out against his skin like a scar. "Jordan," I asked, looking him straight in the eye, "where is your ring?" He froze. For a second, I thought he would tell me the truth. I thought he would break down and tell me about the pawn shop, about the humiliation, about the sacrifice. But he didn't. He forced a smile, a bright, reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh," that he said, casually waving his hand. "I took it off to wash the breakfast dishes earlier. I must have left it by the sink in the kitchen. I always forget to put it back on. My fingers swell in the morning, you know." He lied. He lied to protect me. He lied so I wouldn't feel the crushing guilt of knowing he had sold his marriage to buy my health. He lied to keep my dignity intact while he sacrificed his own. I nodded slowly. "Ah, be careful, son. That ring is a symbol. You don't want to lose it." "I won't." "Dad," he promised, his voice cracking slightly, "I will go put it on right now." He turned and walked out of the room, presumably to the kitchen, to pretend to find a ring that wasn't there. I sat there holding the glass of water. The vitamin pill felt heavy in my hand, heavier than lead. I swallowed it. It tasted like ash. My heart was twisting in my chest, a physical pain that had nothing to do with age or illness. I had my answer. I had seen the depth of his soul. He was pure gold in a world of cheap copper. But the test wasn't over. Not yet. I needed to burn the bridge completely. I needed to ensure that when I lifted him up, he would never look back. I needed to destroy the safety net of his siblings so he would know exactly who they were. I reached under the pillow and pulled out the Nokia. I opened the encrypted messaging app. My thumb hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. Once I sent this, the machinery of my empire would begin to turn, and it would crush everything in its path. I typed the message to Mr. Braxton, my chief legal counsel. "Start phase 2. Activate the debt trap. Target Terrence and Vanessa. Show no mercy." I hit send. I heard Jordan in the kitchen rattling pots and pans, pretending everything was normal. Pretending he hadn't just sold a piece of his soul for me. I lay back on the pillow and closed my eyes. The lion was awake, and he was hungry for justice. I locked the bathroom door and sat on the edge of the cracked porcelain tub. The air smelled of mildew and lemon cleaning spray. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. They were trembling from the adrenaline of the hunt. I held the cheap burner phone I had bought at a gas station days ago. This was the detonator. I was about to blow up the bridges to my past life, and the only thing that would remain standing was the truth. I dialed Terrence first. It rang 4 times. I knew he was in a strategy meeting for his campaign. He hated interruptions, but he would answer this. I had sent him a text message 2 minutes ago that simply read, "It is a matter of life and death." "What is it now?" He answered, his voice a hushed whisper of irritation. "I am in the middle of a briefing with the district attorney. Make it quick." I forced a sob into my voice. I hyperventilated, letting the panic seep through the phone line. "Terrence, they found me," I gasped. "Oh God, they found me." "Who found you?" he snapped. "Stop crying and speak clearly." "The loan sharks." I lied, spinning the web tighter. "The men I borrowed the money from for the bad investment. It was $50,000, Terrence. I thought I could pay it back, but the interest. It just kept growing. They cornered me this morning. They have guns, Terrence." Terrence was silent for a second. I could hear the gears turning in his head. He wasn't worried about my safety. He was calculating the risk to himself. $50,000, he repeated. "That is a lot of money for a washed-up old man." "Why are you telling me this? I told you I gave you $200. We are done." "Because they know who you are," I screamed into the phone, letting my voice crack. "They know you are my son. They know you are running for city council. They said if I do not pay by tomorrow night, they are going to pay you a visit. They said they will go to your campaign headquarters. They said they will go to Vanessa's penthouse. They said rich kids pay better than poor fathers. That was the trigger. I heard a chair scrape against the floor on the other end of the line. Terrence had stood up. "You listen to me, you senile old fool," he hissed, his voice losing its polished politician veneer. "Do not give them my address. Do not even speak my name. If thugs show up at my headquarters, my poll numbers will tank. I will be ruined." "Vanessa," I moaned, ignoring him. "I have to call Vanessa. They are going there next." "Do not call her," Terrence shouted. "I will merge the call. Do not say a word to anyone else." A moment later, the line clicked. Vanessa was on the line. "What is going on, Terrence?" she demanded, sounding annoyed. "I am at the spa." "Dad owes 50 grand to the mob," Terrence blurted out. "And he told them who we are. They are coming to collect from us." "What?" Vanessa shrieked. Her voice pierced my ear. "Are you kidding me? Greg will kill me. We have a reputation. We cannot have gangsters banging on our door. Think of the press. Think of my clients. Dad, how could you be so selfish?" "I am scared, Vanessa," I pleaded, playing the pathetic victim. "Please, just help me pay it. 50,000 is nothing to you. Greg makes that in a week. Terrence, your campaign chest has millions. Just pay them off and I will disappear. I promise." "Pay them." Terrence laughed, a cruel, incredulous sound. "You think I'm going to use campaign funds to pay off your gambling debts or whatever this is? That is embezzlement. I would go to jail. And I'm not asking Greg for $50,000 to clean up your mess," Vanessa added. "He already thinks you are a loser. This would just prove him right. We are not paying a dime. But they will hurt me," I cried. "They said they will break my legs." "Then you better start running," Terrence said coldly, "because you are not bringing this storm to my doorstep. Listen to me very carefully. Dad," Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a terrifying calm, "we are not going to help you. In fact, we are going to make sure that whatever happens to you does not splash onto us. We are calling our lawyers right now." "Lawyers?" I asked, letting my voice tremble. "To help me. To protect us," Terrence corrected. "We are drafting a document immediately, a total disclaimer of financial responsibility. We are cutting legal ties. We are going to have a judge sign an emergency order stating that we have no relationship with you and no liability for your debts. If those men come to us, we will show them the paper and send them back to you." "You would do that," I whispered. "You would leave me to die." "You left us no choice," Vanessa said. "You are toxic, Dad. You are a sinking ship, and we are not going down with you. Goodbye." The line went dead. I lowered the phone from my ear. My hand was steady now. The tears I had forced were gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They had failed the final test. Faced with the threat of violence against their father, they chose to build a legal wall. They had the money. They could have written a check and not even felt it. Instead, they chose to abandon me to a violent fate. I washed my face in the sink, staring at my reflection in the dirty mirror. The eyes staring back were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a judge who had just passed a sentence. I stepped out of the bathroom. Jordan was sitting at the small kitchen table, grading papers under the dim light. Emily was counting coins from a jar, trying to figure out if they could afford milk and bread. The phone in the living room rang. It was the landline, a dusty old thing Jordan kept because the cell service in the slums was unreliable. Jordan picked it up. "Hello?" I stood in the doorway, watching him. I could hear Terrence shouting on the other end. His voice was so loud I could make out the words from across the room. "You idiot," Terrence screamed. "You took him in, didn't you? I know he is there. You are sheltering a criminal, Jordan. He owes 50 grand to the mob." Jordan looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. He didn't hang up. He didn't look at me with suspicion. He just listened. "They are going to come for us," Terrence continued, "because you were stupid enough to open your door. Well, listen to me, little brother. Vanessa and I are out. We are done. We just got off the phone with the family attorney. We are drafting a severance agreement." "What does that mean?" Jordan asked, his voice calm but tight. "It means we are formally disowning him," Terrence spat, "and we are transferring all custodial responsibility to you. Since you want to play the saint, you can pay the price. We are sending a courier with the papers. You are going to sign a document stating that you accept full financial and legal responsibility for Dad. You will indemnify me and Vanessa from any claims. If the mob comes, they come for you. If he gets sick, you pay. If he dies, you bury him. We are washing our hands of this." Jordan looked at me. He looked at my worn-out clothes. He looked at the fear I was projecting on my face. He looked at Emily, who had stopped counting coins and was holding her pregnant belly, her face pale. Jordan didn't ask me if it was true. He didn't ask if I really owed the money. He didn't ask if I had put his family in danger. He made a decision based on who he was, not on what I had done. "Send the papers," Jordan said firmly. What Terrence sounded stunned. "You will sign them. You know what you are doing. You are ruining your life for a deadbeat." "He is not a deadbeat," Jordan said, his voice rising for the first time. "He is our father, Terrence. And if you and Vanessa are too cowardly to take care of him, then I will. Send the papers. I will sign whatever you want. I will take full responsibility. Just leave us alone. Do not call here again." Jordan slammed the phone down. The plastic housing cracked slightly. He stood there breathing hard, his chest heaving. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Emily stood up and walked over to him. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her head on his shoulder. "We will figure it out," she whispered. "We always do." Jordan turned and looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes, only a profound sadness. "Dad," he said, walking over and placing a hand on my shoulder. "Is it true? Do you owe money to dangerous people?" I nodded, looking at the floor. "Yes, son. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to bring this to your door. I should leave. I cannot put you and Leo in danger." I made a move toward the door, grabbing my ragged coat. Jordan blocked my path. He locked the deadbolt and leaned his back against the door. "You are not going anywhere," he said. "If they come, they come. But you are not facing them alone on the street. We will call the police, we will board up the windows, we will sell the truck if we have to. But you stay." "But Terrence," I started to say. "Terrence is wrong," Jordan interrupted. "He has always been wrong about what matters. He thinks family is a liability. He thinks love is a transaction. Let him send the papers. I will sign them gladly. I would rather be poor and have a father than be rich and have no soul." I looked at this young man, this poor teacher who had nothing but his integrity and his love. He was willing to take on a $50,000 debt he couldn't pay just to keep me safe. He was willing to shield me from the wolves, even if it meant being eaten himself. 2 hours later, a bike messenger arrived. He banged on the door aggressively. He handed Jordan a thick envelope with the logo of a high-powered law firm. Jordan opened it on the kitchen table. It was a brutal document. It stripped Terrence and Vanessa of any obligation to me. It stated that Jordan Carter accepted sole guardianship and financial liability for Jefferson Carter. It was a document designed to save their assets and doom their brother. Jordan didn't even read the fine print. He borrowed a pen from Emily. He signed his name at the bottom of the page in bold, defiant strokes. He handed the papers back to the messenger. "Tell my brother he got what he wanted," Jordan said. The messenger left. Jordan closed the door and locked it. He turned to me and forced a smile. "It is done, Dad. You are safe. You are with us now. Nobody can kick you out. Nobody can hurt you. We are a team." I lowered my head to hide the triumphant gleam in my eyes. Jordan thought he had just signed his death warrant. He thought he had just accepted a burden that would crush him. He did not know that he had just signed the most lucrative contract in the history of the Carter family. He did not know that the paper he just signed legally removed Terrence and Vanessa from my will and designated him as the sole beneficiary of an empire. He had accepted the debt, and by doing so, he had inherited the kingdom. I sat back in the armchair, pulling the blanket tighter around me. My heart was racing. The trap was set. The rats had taken the bait. Terrence and Vanessa thought they were free. They thought they had dumped their garbage on their little brother. Tomorrow the garbage would turn into gold, and they would be left holding nothing but their own greed. I watched Jordan and Emily sit on the floor counting their coins again, trying to find enough for dinner. They were terrified, but they were together. "Hold on, son," I thought. "Just hold on one more day. The cavalry is coming. And it is riding in a limousine." The sun had set over the tenements, but the neighborhood was never truly dark. Flashing blue lights from police cruisers and the yellow haze of street lamps created a perpetual twilight. I sat in the corner of Jordan and Emily's tiny living room, watching my grandson Leo play with a wooden block on the frayed rug. The air smelled of leftovers and anxiety. Jordan was pacing back and forth, his hands clenched into fists, while Emily sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the wall, her hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. We were waiting for the executioners. At 8 o'clock sharp, the executioners arrived. They did not come quietly. They announced their presence with the roar of expensive engines that shook the thin glass of the windows. I stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the duct-taped curtain just an inch. Below, two massive black SUVs and a silver Porsche had pulled up right onto the sidewalk, blocking the entrance to the building. They parked aggressively, forcing the residents who were walking home from their double shifts to step into the muddy street to get around them. It was a display of power. It was an invasion. I saw Terrence step out of the first SUV. He was flanked by two security guards, the same ones who had thrown me into the mud the night before. He looked around the neighborhood with a sneer of absolute disgust, adjusting his suit jacket as if the air itself might stain the fabric. From the Porsche emerged Vanessa and Greg. Vanessa was wearing a white pantsuit, a ridiculous choice for a visit to the slums, but a calculated one. It was a statement. I am pure and this place is filth. They marched up the stairs. I could hear their footsteps, heavy and authoritative, echoing in the stairwell. They did not knock. They pounded on the door like police serving a warrant. Jordan took a deep breath. He looked at Emily, then at me. "Stay back, Dad," he said quietly. "Let me handle this." He opened the door. The smell of expensive cologne and perfume rushed into the apartment, instantly overpowering the scent of our modest dinner. Terrence walked in first, pushing past Jordan without a word. He scanned the room, his eyes darting from the peeling paint to the mismatched furniture and finally landing on me, huddled in the corner. "You are still here," Terrence spat. "I thought you would have had the decency to die of shame by now." Vanessa and Greg followed him in. Vanessa stopped in the doorway. She pulled a silk handkerchief from her purse and pressed it over her nose and mouth. Her eyes fell on Emily. Emily was standing by the kitchenette, wearing her nurse scrubs stained from a long shift and an apron. Her hair was messy, tied up in a loose bun. She looked exhausted but beautiful in a way Vanessa would never understand. Vanessa lowered the handkerchief just long enough to speak. "My God," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "This place is even worse than I imagined." "And you, Emily, you fit right in. I suppose this is the best a girl like you could hope for. It smells like failure in here." Emily flinched, but she did not look away. She stood her ground, her chin held high. "Welcome to our home, Vanessa," Emily said calmly. "Can I get you a glass of water?" Vanessa laughed, a short, cruel sound. "Water from these pipes? Absolutely not. I do not want to catch whatever diseases you people are breeding in here. My father, being here for 24 hours, has probably already infected him with something. We need to get this done fast so we can go home and decontaminate." Greg stepped forward. He was holding a leather portfolio. He looked at me with a smirk that made my blood boil. "Hello, Jefferson," Greg said. "You look comfortable. I see you found a level of society that matches your investment skills. Bottom of the barrel." Jordan stepped between them and me. His posture was rigid. "Say what you came to say and get out," Jordan said, his voice low and dangerous. Terrence turned his attention to his younger brother. He looked at Jordan with pity, mixed with contempt. "We are here to save our own skins," little brother Terrence said. "Since you decided to be the hero, we are going to let you. We brought the papers." Greg opened the portfolio and pulled out a thick document stapled at the top. He tossed it onto the chipped kitchen table. It landed with a heavy slap, sliding across the surface until it hit the salt shaker. "What is this?" Jordan asked, not moving to pick it up. "It is a comprehensive release of liability," Greg explained, tapping the paper with his manicured finger. "It states that you, Jordan Carter, acknowledge that Jefferson Carter is indigent and solely your responsibility. It states that you possess full guardianship. It explicitly indemnifies Terrence and Vanessa from any debts, medical bills, or legal issues arising from the existence of your father." Basically, Terrence added, walking over to stand right in Jordan's face. "It means he is your problem now. If the mob comes for the $50,000, they come to this address. If he needs a heart transplant, you pay for it. If he dies, you pay for the box. We are washing our hands of him. Legally, permanently." Jordan looked at the papers. He looked at his brother. "You would do this?" Jordan asked softly. "You would sign away your own father like he is a used car?" "He is a liability," Terrence shouted, losing his composure for a second. "He threatened my campaign. He threatened Vanessa's business. He is toxic, Jordan. And if you are stupid enough to keep him, then you deserve to go down with him. Sign the damn papers." Vanessa stepped gingerly into the room, careful not to let her white pants touch the furniture. "Just sign it, Jordan," she said impatiently. "We have dinner reservations at Le Monde in an hour. I need to go home and shower first. I feel dirty just standing here. Greg laughed. Come on, old man, he said, looking over Jordan's shoulder at me. Tell your boy to sign. Do us all a favor. Speed this up so we can go sanitize ourselves. I sat in the chair watching them. They were so confident, so arrogant. They thought they were winning. They thought they were cutting off a gangrenous limb. They had no idea they were cutting their own throats. Jordan walked to the table. He picked up the document. He read the first page. His hands were shaking not from fear but from rage. This says you forfeit all rights to any future assets or estate, Jordan read aloud. Terrence scoffed. Assets? What assets? The old man is $50,000 in the hole. His estate is a negative number. Yes, we forfeit everything. We forfeit the debt. Sign it. Jordan looked at Emily. She nodded. It was a silent agreement between them, a pact of solidarity. Jordan picked up a cheap blue ballpoint pen from the table. He pressed it to the paper. I am signing this, Jordan said, his voice rising, filling the small room. Not because you are forcing me, but because I wanted in writing that he is mine. I wanted on record that when he needed you, you treated him like garbage. I want the world to know that I am the only son he has left. He signed his name. He pressed down so hard the pen tore through the paper on the last stroke. He threw the pen against the wall. It shattered, leaving a blue ink stain on the peeling paint. Done! Jordan roared. He grabbed the papers and shoved them into Greg's chest. Now get out! Get out of my house! Terrence smoothed his suit jacket, smiling smugly. He picked up his copy of the document. Gladly, he said. Have fun with the debt collectors, little brother. And Dad, do not ever call me again. You are dead to me. Vanessa looked at me one last time. Goodbye, Dad, she said coldly. Try not to ruin Jordan's life too fast. Although looking at this place, it is already ruined. They turned and marched out. Greg lingered for a second, looking at Emily. You know, if you ever get tired of playing nurse in the slums, give me a call. We could use a maid. Emily picked up a glass of water from the table and threw the contents in his face. Get out! She screamed. Greg wiped the water from his face, shocked. Then he sneered. Trash. Just trash. He turned and left, slamming the door behind him. We heard their footsteps retreating down the stairs. We heard the engines of their luxury cars roar to life. We heard them drive away, leaving silence in their wake. Jordan stood in the middle of the room, breathing heavily, his chest heaving. He looked like he had just fought a war. He turned to me. His anger evaporated, replaced by a look of profound sorrow. I am sorry, Dad, he whispered. I am sorry you had to hear that. I am sorry they are like that. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked, but I felt stronger than I had in years. I walked over to the table. There on the wood lay the carbon copy of the document Jordan had just signed. The release of liability. The severance of ties. I picked it up. My hands were steady. This was it. This was the Holy Grail. This piece of paper was more valuable than gold. It was a legal document signed by witnesses voluntarily executed that stripped Terrence and Vanessa of any claim to my estate. They had just unknowingly signed away their inheritance. They had signed away their rights to the Carter Logistics empire. They had signed away millions of dollars to avoid a fictitious $50,000 debt. I folded the paper carefully and placed it in the inner pocket of my ragged coat right next to the encrypted phone. Jordan's son, I said, my voice firm, do not be sorry. You just did the bravest thing I have ever seen. You defended your family, you defended your home, but the debt, Jordan said, slumping into a chair. Dad, what are we going to do about the $50,000? They are going to come for us. I walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. Let me worry about that, I said. I have a plan. You have a plan. Jordan looked up, confused. Dad, you are broke. What plan can you have? Trust me, I said. Just trust me for one more day. Suddenly there was a heavy pounding on the door, not the arrogant knock of Terrence, but the aggressive demand of authority. Jordan jumped up, panic returning to his eyes. Is it them? He whispered. Is it the loan sharks? I knew who it was. This was the final piece of the puzzle, the final test of their resolve before the revelation. Open it, I said. Jordan walked to the door. He opened it slowly. Standing there was Mr. Henderson, the landlord of the tenement building. He was a small man with a rat-like face holding a clipboard. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood two large men who looked like they broke legs for a living. Mr. Carter, the landlord, said, his voice oily and insincere. We have a problem. What problem? Jordan asked, trying to block the view into the apartment. I paid the rent. It is not due until the 1st. Yeah, well, rents have gone up, the landlord said, smirking. Market adjustment. And I have received complaints. Too many people living in this unit. You got an unauthorized tenant. That old man. He is my father, Jordan said. He is visiting. He is living here, the landlord countered. That is a violation of the lease. Double occupancy fee, plus the rent hike. You owe me another $800 by tomorrow morning, or you are out. All of you. $800. Jordan gasped. That is illegal. You cannot raise the rent like that without notice. And you cannot evict us in 24 hours. I can do whatever I want, the landlord said, gesturing to the two thugs behind him. Unless you want trouble. These gentlemen help me with tenant disputes. Pay up by noon tomorrow, or your stuff is on the curb. He slammed the door in Jordan's face. Jordan leaned his forehead against the wood. He let out a long, shuddering breath. We are going to be homeless, he whispered. Emily walked over to him. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She put her hand on his back. We will figure it out, she said. We always do. I watched them. My heart ached for their suffering, but it soared for their strength. They didn't know that Mr. Henderson, the landlord, had received a visit from my lawyer, Mr. Braxton, just 2 hours ago. They didn't know that I had paid Henderson $5,000 to stage this eviction. I needed to see if Jordan would crack. I needed to see if, when faced with losing his own shelter, he would finally turn on me. Jordan turned around. He looked at me. Dad, he said, his voice steady, we are going to have to pack. We might have to stay at a motel tomorrow, or sleep in the truck. But we are staying together. I am not leaving you behind. There it was, the absolute limit. He was willing to be homeless with his pregnant wife and sick child rather than abandon me. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. Do not pack, son, I said, walking to the window and looking out at the dark street. Why, Dad? Jordan asked, confused. We have to leave. No, we don't, I said. Go to sleep, Jordan. Go to sleep, Emily. You have had a long day. But the landlord, Jordan started. The landlord won't be back, I promised. And tomorrow everything changes. How do you know? Jordan asked. Because I said, turning to look at him, the facade of the weak old man dropping for just a second, revealing the titan of industry underneath. Because tomorrow the sun is going to rise on a very different world. They didn't understand. They were too tired to argue. They laid down on the floor on their thin mattress, holding each other and Leo. I sat in the armchair and waited for the dawn. I checked my Nokia. Message received from Mr. Braxton. The jet is fueled. The car is ready. Phase 3 initiated. I looked at the piece of paper in my pocket, the severance agreement signed by Terrence and Vanessa. It was the most expensive piece of paper they had ever touched. Tomorrow the acting would end. Tomorrow Jefferson Carter would return from the dead, and he was bringing thunder with him. The morning light that filtered into the apartment was gray and unforgiving. It illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air and the cracks in the plaster that looked like spider webs spreading across the ceiling. The air was thick with the residue of the previous night's confrontation. Jordan sat at the small kitchen table, his head in his hands. Emily was quietly washing the few dishes we had used for breakfast. I sat in the armchair pretending to read a newspaper I had salvaged from a trash can days ago, but my eyes were fixed on the door. I knew who was coming. I had arranged it. At 9 o'clock sharp, a heavy fist pounded on the door. It wasn't the tentative knock of a neighbor or the polite tap of a delivery man. It was the knock of a man who owned the wood he was hitting. Jordan jumped. His nerves were already frayed to the breaking point. He looked at the door with dread. "Open up, Mr. Carter," a voice bellowed from the hallway. It was Mr. Henderson, the landlord. He was a small man with weasel eyes and a greasy comb-over, but he wielded his petty power like a king in this tenement. He wasn't alone. I could hear the heavy boots of the two men he usually brought with him to intimidate tenants who were late on rent. Jordan walked to the door and unlocked it. Henderson pushed his way in without an invitation. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on the packed bags in the corner, then on me. He sneered. "We have a problem," Henderson said, crossing his arms. Jordan stepped forward, trying to shield Emily and me from the man's gaze. "There is no problem," Jordan said, his voice steady despite the fear I knew he felt. "Rent is paid until the 1st. You have your money. Market adjustment? Henderson lied smoothly. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. Rents in the neighborhood are going up. Effective immediately, your rent is doubled. And I am retroactively applying a double occupancy fee for the unauthorized tenant. He pointed a yellow-stained finger at me. That old man has been here 3 nights. That is a violation of the lease. You owe me another $800 today, or you are out. Jordan gasped. $800, he choked out. That is illegal. You cannot raise the rent mid-lease without notice, and you cannot evict us in 24 hours. There are laws, Henderson. Henderson laughed. It was a wet hacking sound. Laws cost money to enforce, kid. You got a lawyer. No, I didn't think so. You want to argue, you can argue with my associates in the hallway. Or you can pay up. If I do not have the cash by noon tomorrow, I am changing the locks, and I am keeping your security deposit for damages. He looked around the clean apartment, acting as if he saw filth. This place is a sty anyway. I should charge you for fumigation. Get out, Jordan said, his hands balling into fists. Noon tomorrow, Henderson said, turning his back, or your junk is on the curb. He slammed the door. The sound rattled the windows. Silence descended on the room. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of absolute defeat. Jordan leaned his back against the door and slid down until he was sitting on the floor. He buried his face in his knees. We are done, he whispered. We are homeless. I watched him. My heart ached. I wanted to tell him that Henderson was an actor in my play. I wanted to tell him that I had paid Henderson $5,000 cash 2 hours ago to stage this eviction. I wanted to tell him that the building he lived in was currently being negotiated for purchase by my holding company. But I couldn't. This was the final crucible. The heat had to be turned up to the maximum to see if the metal would crack. I stood up slowly and walked over to my son. Jordan, I said softly. He looked up. His eyes were red. I am sorry, Dad, he said, his voice breaking. I failed you. I promised you were safe here. I promised you a home. And now I can't even keep a roof over my own wife and child. I put a hand on his shoulder. Son, listen to me. I can leave. If I go, maybe he will let you stay. I can go to a shelter. There is a mission downtown. They take people in. You don't have to lose your home because of me. This was the out. This was the moment where a lesser man would have cut his losses. Terrence would have packed my bags for me. Vanessa would have called the Uber. Jordan stood up. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He looked at me with a fierce intensity that reminded me of my own father. No, he said firmly. But Jordan, I started. No, Jordan repeated louder this time. We stick together. You are not going to a shelter. You are not sleeping on the street. We are a family. If we leave together. Emily walked over from the sink. She dried her hands on a towel. She looked at the small pile of belongings they had. Then she looked at me. There was no hesitation in her eyes, no resentment. She was a white woman raised in a world that often looked down on people like us. Yet here she was standing in a slum ready to lose everything for a black man she called father. We have the delivery truck, Emily said, her voice calm and practical. It is not big, but the back is covered. We can put the mattress in there. It will be tight, but it will be dry. Jordan looked at her. Em, you are pregnant. You cannot sleep in the back of a truck. It is freezing at night. I can do whatever I have to do, Emily replied. We will find a cheap motel for a night or two until you get paid on Friday. Then we will find a new place, a smaller place. There are no smaller places, Jordan said despairingly. This is the bottom of the barrel, Em. Then we will find a barrel, Emily said, taking his hand, as long as we are together. We are not leaving your dad behind. I looked at Emily. I really looked at her. In that moment, she reminded me of my late wife. She had that same steel spine wrapped in velvet. She didn't see color. She didn't see class. She saw a human being who needed help. I thought about Vanessa screaming about her Persian rug. I thought about Terrence worrying about his poll numbers. They were my blood, yet they treated me like a contagion. Emily was a stranger by blood, but a daughter by spirit. She treated me with a dignity that I hadn't felt in years. She didn't know I was a billionaire. She didn't know I could buy her a hospital. She just knew I was an old man who was cold and hungry, and that was enough for her. She started packing. She moved with efficiency, folding Leo's clothes, placing them into plastic bags. She didn't complain. She didn't blame Jordan for his lack of funds. She didn't glare at me for being the catalyst of this disaster. I sat back down in the armchair. I watched them dismantle their life. They took down the few pictures on the walls. They packed the pots and pans. They were preparing to become homeless. They were preparing to live in a truck rather than abandon me. The test was over. They had passed with flying colors. They had proven that their love was not conditional, it was absolute. I felt a lump in my throat. I had spent my life building an empire of concrete and steel thinking that was my legacy. I was wrong. My legacy was standing right in front of me packing a toaster into a cardboard box. The afternoon wore on. The apartment became emptier and sadder. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the bare floor. "We should move the mattress to the truck while it is still light," Jordan said. He looked defeated. He looked like a man who had fought the world and lost. I stood up. I couldn't let them move that mattress. I couldn't let them spend 1 second thinking they were going to sleep in a truck. "Jordan, wait," I said. He turned to me. "Yeah, Dad." "Don't move the mattress," I said. "Not yet." "Why?" Jordan asked. "We have to be out by noon." I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. The streetlights were flickering on, illuminating the potholes and the trash. But in my mind, I saw something else. I saw the future. "Because we are not going to need the truck," I said, turning back to them. Jordan sighed. "Dad, I appreciate the optimism, but we have to be realistic. Henderson is not bluffing." "I am not bluffing either," I said. My voice changed. I dropped the raspy tremor I had been using for days. I stood up straighter. My shoulders went back. The air of the confused old man evaporated, leaving the presence of the CEO. Jordan frowned. "Dad, you sound different." "Listen to me, son," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "You have trusted me this far. Trust me for one more night. Do not pack the mattress. Do not put Leo in that truck." "But what are we going to do?" Jordan asked, throwing his hands up. "We are going to wait," I said. "Wait for what?" Emily asked softly, stepping closer. "For the morning," I said. "Dad." Jordan said, his voice gentle as if speaking to a child. "I know you are stressed. I know this is hard. But nobody is coming to save us. Terrence and Vanessa made that clear. We are on our own." "You are not on your own," I said firmly. "You have me." Jordan looked at me with pity. I could see the thought forming in his head. The stress has finally snapped his mind. He is delusional. "Okay, Dad," he said soothingly. "We will wait until morning, but we are packing the boxes just in case." He went back to packing. He didn't believe me. Why would he? To him, I was a bankrupt failure. I walked over to my coat, which was hanging by the door. I reached into the pocket and felt the cool metal of the Nokia phone. I saw the message I had received earlier from Mr. Braxton. Assets liquidated. Trust fund activated. The jet is on the tarmac. The car will be at your coordinates at 0800 hours. I looked back at my son and his wife. They were huddled over a box of books, deciding which ones to keep and which ones to leave behind because of the weight. They were making impossible choices. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them they could buy a library. I wanted to tell them they could buy the publishing house. But the surprise had to be total. The revelation had to be absolute. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of tap water. I raised it in a silent toast to the empty room. To poverty, I thought, for it has shown me the true face of wealth. I went to bed early that night. I lay on the mattress in the bedroom listening to the sounds of the city. I heard sirens, I heard shouting, but underneath it all I heard the steady breathing of my grandson. Tomorrow he would breathe filtered air in a mansion. Tomorrow he would have the best doctors in the world. Tomorrow he would never have to worry about a copay again. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. When I woke up, the apartment was filled with the gray light of dawn. Jordan was already up, sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, staring at the door as if waiting for the executioner. "Good morning, son," I said, walking out of the bedroom. He looked up. He looked like a ghost. "Morning, Dad," he whispered. I walked over to the window. I looked down at the street. It was empty except for a stray dog sniffing at a garbage bag. Then I checked my watch. 0758. 2 minutes. "Get Emily and Leo up," I said. "Why?" Jordan asked, rubbing his eyes. "Is Henderson here?" "No," I said. "But our ride is." Jordan stood up, confused. "Dad, we don't have a ride. We have the truck." "Not today," I said. I looked down at the street again. At the end of the block, a black shape turned the corner. It was long. It was sleek. It moved with a silent, predatory grace that seemed alien in this neighborhood of rust and decay. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Behind it were two black SUVs. The convoy moved slowly down the potholed street, avoiding the debris. People on the sidewalk stopped and stared. This kind of money didn't come to this neighborhood unless it was a funeral or a drug bust. The cars pulled up directly in front of our building. They double-parked, blocking the street completely. Jordan came to the window. He looked down. "Who is that?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Is that the mob? Did they come for the 50,000? I smiled. "No, son. That is not the mob." The driver's door of the Rolls-Royce opened. A man stepped out. He was dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit. He adjusted his tie and looked up at our window. It was Mr. Braxton, my lawyer, the shark in a suit who had helped me build my empire. Jordan grabbed Emily, who had just walked out of the bedroom holding Leo. "Get back!" he shouted, pushing them toward the bathroom. "Hide. It is them. They came for the money." He grabbed a baseball bat from the corner of the room. He stood in front of me, shielding me with his body. "Do not worry, Dad," he said, his voice shaking but fierce. "I won't let them touch you." I put my hand on the bat. I gently lowered it. "You don't need that, Jordan." "Dad, get back," Jordan yelled. "You don't know these people." "I know them very well," I said. There was a knock on the door. 3 sharp, precise raps. Jordan froze. "Open it," I said. Jordan shook his head. "No. Open it, son." I repeated, my voice carrying a tone of command that I hadn't used in days. "It is okay." Jordan looked at me. He saw something in my face. He saw the confidence. He saw the lack of fear. He walked to the door. He unlocked it. He opened it slowly, ready to swing the bat. Mr. Braxton stood there. He didn't look at Jordan. He looked past him. He looked straight at me. He didn't pull out a gun. He didn't pull out a warrant. He bowed. "Good morning, Mr. Carter Braxton," said his voice respectful and deferential. "The transfer is complete. Your jet is waiting at the private airfield, and your new wardrobe is in the trunk." Jordan dropped the bat. It clattered onto the floor. "Mr. Carter," Jordan stammered, looking from Braxton to me. "But I am Mr. Carter." Braxton smiled, a thin, professional smile. "I was addressing the chairman's son." I stepped forward. I walked past Jordan. I stood in the doorway. I looked at Braxton. "Good morning, Braxton. Did you bring the check?" "I have it right here, sir." I turned to Jordan. He was pale. Emily was holding Leo, her mouth open in shock. "Get your things," I said. "We are leaving." Leaving to where Jordan whispered. "The shelter." "No, son," I said. "We are going home. The real home. And we are going to pay a visit to your brother and sister. They are having a party tonight, and I think it is time we crashed it." Jordan looked at me as if I were a stranger, and in a way I was. The old broken man was gone. Jefferson Carter was back, and he had a bill to collect. The rumble started low and deep, vibrating the floorboards of the 4th-floor apartment. It was not the rattling clank of the city garbage trucks or the screech of the buses that usually woke us up. This was a smooth, powerful hum like the purring of a giant predator. Jordan looked up from the floor where he had been staring at his shoes. His eyes were bloodshot and wide with fear. He assumed it was Henderson coming early to throw our belongings onto the sidewalk. He stood up and moved instinctively toward the door, placing his body between the entrance and the corner where Emily and Leo were huddled. I walked to the window and pulled back the duct-taped curtain. The street below, which usually hosted stray dogs and rusted sedans, had been transformed. A sleek black limousine, longer than any car that had ever driven down this block, was idling at the curb. Its windows were tinted so dark they looked like polished obsidian, reflecting the decaying brick of the tenement building back at itself. Flanking it were 2 massive black SUVs. Men in dark suits and earpieces were stepping out, scanning the rooftops and the street corners with professional detachment. They looked like Secret Service agents dropped into a war zone. Jordan came up beside me and looked down. His breath hitched in his throat. "It is them," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It is the loan shark's dad. They came for the $50,000. They came to break our legs, just like they promised." He grabbed my arm, his grip desperate. "Dad, you have to hide. Go into the bathroom. Lock the door. Do not come out no matter what you hear." He turned to Emily. "Take Leo and get in the closet," he ordered. "If you hear fighting, call the police." "No, Jordan," Emily cried, clutching our grandson. "They will kill you. Do as I say," Jordan shouted, his voice cracking with panic. I watched my son prepare to die for me. He looked around the room for a weapon. He grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove. It was pathetic against what he thought was coming, but he held it like a sword. He was terrified, shaking so hard his teeth were almost chattering, but he planted his feet firmly in the center of the room. He was a barrier of flesh and bone standing against a tidal wave. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to tell him it was over, but the theater had to play out to its conclusion. Footsteps echoed in the stairwell, heavy, precise steps, not the shuffling of junkies or the running of children. These were the steps of men on a mission. They stopped outside our door. There was a knock, 3 sharp raps, authoritative, expectant. Jordan raised the skillet. His knuckles were white. "Go away," he yelled, his voice shaking. "We have no money." "Leave us alone." A voice came through the door, calm and muffled. "Open the door, Mr. Carter." "It is not up for discussion," Jordan yelled back. "I am calling the cops." I stepped forward. I put my hand on Jordan's shoulder. He flinched, as if he had been burned. "Dad, get back," he hissed, pushing me behind him. "Open it, Jordan," I said calmly. He looked at me like I was insane. "Are you crazy, Dad? They will kill us." "They are not here to kill us, son," I said, my voice dropping the raspy tremor I had used for days. I stood up straight, my spine uncurled, my shoulders went back. "Open the door." Something in my tone stopped him. It was a command, not a request. It was the voice of a man who was used to being obeyed by thousands of employees. Jordan lowered the skillet, slightly confusion warring with fear in his eyes. He unlocked the deadbolt with a trembling hand. He opened the door just a crack, ready to slam it shut. The door was pushed open gently but firmly from the outside. A man stepped into the room. He was not a thug. He was not a loan shark. He was an older white man with silver hair wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than this entire building. He held a leather briefcase in one hand. Behind him, 2 large men in suits stood guard in the hallway, blocking the view of the curious neighbors who had peeked out. Jordan stumbled back, dropping the skillet with a loud clang. He looked from the man to me, his mouth opening and closing. Mr. Braxton stood in the center of the room. He looked at the peeling paint, the water stains on the ceiling, and the meager belongings packed in garbage bags. His expression did not change. He was a professional. He turned his gaze to Jordan, then to Emily, and finally he looked at me. He did not sneer. He did not ask what I was doing in this dump. He bowed his head slightly. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." Braxton said, his voice respectful and deferential. "I trust your stay has been informative." Jordan looked at the lawyer, then back at me. "You know him?" Jordan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Dad, who is this?" Braxton ignored him. He stepped forward and placed the briefcase on the kitchen table, pushing aside the stack of unpaid bills. He snapped the latches open. "The transfer is complete," Sir Braxton said. "The liquid assets have been moved to the primary trust. The acquisition of the building we are standing in was finalized 10 minutes ago. You are now the sole owner of this property and the 3 surrounding blocks." Owner, Jordan choked out. Braxton continued as if my son had not spoken. "Your flight plan is filed. The Gulfstream is fueled and waiting at the private airfield. The flight crew is on standby, and as requested, I have brought the items." Braxton reached into the briefcase and pulled out a garment bag he had draped over his arm. He unzipped it. Inside was a navy blue bespoke suit, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie. He laid them on the armchair. Then he pulled out a pair of polished Oxfords and placed them on the floor. Jordan and Emily were frozen. They looked like statues. They couldn't process what was happening. Their brains were trying to reconcile the image of the homeless old man they had been feeding soup with the man being addressed as a king. I walked over to the armchair. I picked up the jacket. I felt the familiar texture of high-quality wool. I took off the ragged khaki coat I had worn for 3 days and let it drop to the floor. It landed with a soft thud, a shed skin of poverty. "Thank you, Braxton," I said. My voice was strong, clear, and resonant. I turned to my son. Jordan was staring at me as if I were a stranger. In a way, I was. He had never met Jefferson Carter, the tycoon. He had only known Dad, the strict father, and then Dad, the broken old man. "Dad," Jordan stammered. "What is going on? You said you were bankrupt. You said you lost everything." "I lied," I said simply. Jordan reeled back as if I had slapped him. "You lied," he repeated, "about the loan sharks, about the $50,000. All of it, I said, buttoning the fresh white shirt Braxton handed me. There are no loan sharks, Jordan. There is no debt. I have never been bankrupt a day in my life. But why, Jordan, cried, tears filling his eyes again. Why would you do this? We were terrified. I sold my ring. We were going to live in a truck. Why would you put us through this hell? Because I needed to know, I said, walking up to him. I needed to know who loved me and who loved my money. I looked at him intensely. Your brother and sister threw me out into the rain, Jordan. They threatened to call the police on their own father because I didn't fit their aesthetic. They disowned me to save their bank accounts. But you opened your door. You gave me your bed. You sold your wedding ring to buy medicine for a dying old man. You were willing to become homeless rather than abandon me. I reached out and cupped his face. You passed the test, son. You are the only one who passed. Jordan was crying openly now, shaking his head in disbelief. So you are rich, he whispered. I am not just rich, Jordan, I said. I am Carter Logistics. I am the reason half the cargo in this country moves. And as of this morning, you are the sole heir to everything I built. Emily gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. I turned to Braxton. Give it to him, I said. Braxton reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a rectangular slip of paper. He handed it to me. I looked at it. It was a cashier's check drawn from my personal account. I took Jordan's hand. I pressed the paper into his palm. What is this? Jordan asked, looking down at it through his tears. Read it, I said. He focused on the numbers. His eyes widened until I thought they would pop out of his head. He looked at Emily, then back at me. His knees gave way and he sat down hard on the floor. $50,000, he whispered. That is just for tonight, I said. That is walking around money, Jordan. That is for you to go out right now and buy a suit. Buy Emily a dress. Buy Leo the best toy you can find, because tonight we are going to a party. A party? Emily asked, her voice faint. Terrence is celebrating his primary victory tonight, I said, my eyes hardening. He thinks he has won. He thinks he got rid of the problem. He thinks he is safe. We are going to show him how wrong he is. Jordan looked at the check again. He touched the paper as if testing to see if it was real. Dad, this is more money than I make in a year. It is a drop in the bucket, son, I said. Get up, get dressed. We are leaving this place. Jordan stood up slowly. He looked around the apartment at the peeling walls and the packed boxes. We are leaving, he asked. For good. I nodded. You never have to sleep here again. You never have to worry about rent again. You never have to worry about Leo's medicine again. The best doctors in the world will treat him starting today. Emily began to sob. She sank to the floor, hugging Leo, rocking him back and forth. Thank you, she cried. Thank you, God. I walked over and helped her up. Do not thank God just yet, Emily, I said gently. And do not thank me. You earned this. You earned every penny with your kindness. I turned back to Braxton. Is the car ready? It is downstairs, Sir Braxton replied, along with the security detail. Good, I said. I finished dressing. I tied the silk tie, looking in the cracked mirror one last time. The transformation was complete. The beggar was gone. The chairman had returned. I turned to my family. My real family. Let's go home, I said. The real home. Jordan looked at me one last time. He wiped his face. He stood tall. He looked at the check in his hand, then he folded it and put it in his pocket. He didn't look like a poor teacher anymore. He looked like the son of a king. We followed Braxton out of the apartment. We left the door unlocked. We left the boxes packed. We left the old life behind in the dust. We walked down the stairs past the stunned neighbors who were peeking out of their doors. We walked out into the sunlight. The chauffeur opened the back door of the limousine. I ushered Emily and Leo inside. Jordan stopped at the door. He looked up at the crumbling building where he had struggled for so years. Goodbye, he whispered. Get in, son, I said, patting his back. We have a timeline. He got in. I slid in beside him. The door closed, shutting out the noise and the smell of the slums. The interior smelled of leather and promise. To the mall. Braxton, I said, my son needs a suit. And then to the Grand Hotel. The car pulled away, gliding over the potholes like a ship over calm water. I looked at Jordan. He was holding Emily's hand. They were smiling. Tonight the world would know the truth. Tonight Terrence and Vanessa would learn the price of betrayal. And tonight, Jordan would get his ring back. I tapped the breast pocket of my new suit where the gold band was safely tucked away, waiting for the right moment. The game was over. The reckoning had arrived. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Hotel ballroom cast a diamond-fractured light over the cream of Atlanta society. Waiters in white jackets moved like ghosts through the crowd, offering trays of champagne and caviar. In the center of it all stood Terrence, holding a crystal flute like a scepter. He was laughing, his head thrown back, exposing his throat in a display of arrogance that made my fingers itch. He was surrounded by donors, senators, and local power brokers, all basking in the glow of his primary victory. Vanessa, in cleaning up the crumbs of his success, stood nearby. Vanessa was wearing a silver dress that looked like chainmail, her eyes scanning the room to make sure she was being seen by the right people. Greg was swirling a glass of scotch, trying to look like he belonged in a room where the entry fee was more than his annual salary. They were celebrating. They were toasting to the future. They were toasting to a world where I did not exist. Outside the heavy mahogany doors, the atmosphere was very different. The valet stand, usually a place of quiet efficiency, was in chaos. My convoy had arrived. The lead SUV had parked diagonally across the entrance, blocking the lane. The limousine pulled up behind it, taking up 2 spots. The drivers did not hand over their keys. They stood by the doors, hands clasped in front of them, scanning the perimeter. I sat in the back of the limousine, adjusting my cufflinks. They were solid platinum, inlaid with onyx. I looked at Jordan. He was staring out the tinted window at the red carpet. He looked terrified, but he also looked magnificent. The bespoke charcoal suit I had bought him fit his frame perfectly, accentuating the strength he had gained from lifting boxes in a warehouse. He didn't look like a poor teacher anymore. He looked like a prince in exile returning to claim his throne. Emily sat beside him, her hand resting on his knee. The emerald green gown flowed around her like liquid money. Her hair was swept up, revealing her elegant neck. She looked at me and nodded. She was ready. "Showtime," I said. The chauffeur opened the door. The flashbulbs of the paparazzi who had been waiting for local celebrities erupted like a supernova. They didn't know who we were, but they knew money when they saw it. I stepped out onto the red carpet. The air was crisp. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs, not with the smell of wet wool and mold, but with the scent of expensive cologne and power. I walked toward the entrance. The doormen who would have blocked my path yesterday bowed low, holding the heavy glass doors open. We didn't stop at their check-in desk. We didn't show tickets. We walked straight through the lobby, our footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Braxton walked a step behind me, carrying the briefcase that contained the death warrants of my children's careers. We reached the double doors of the ballroom. The security guards hired by Terrence's campaign stepped forward to block us. They saw 3 strangers walking with a purpose that made them nervous. "Event is closed," one guard started to say, putting a hand on his earpiece. Braxton stepped forward, smooth as a viper. He didn't raise his voice. He simply held up a small black card. "Management," he said. The guards hesitated. In that second of hesitation, we walked past them. We entered the ballroom. The transition was instantaneous. The hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the soft jazz from the band, it all seemed to freeze as we walked down the grand staircase. It started as a ripple near the entrance. Heads turned, eyes widened. Eyes. Whispers broke out like wildfire. "Who is that? Is that a movie star? Is that the governor?" The wave of silence rolled across the room until it hit the stage where Terrence was holding court. He felt the shift in the room's energy. He turned around, a smile still plastered on his face, ready to greet a late-arriving donor. His eyes landed on us. The glass of champagne slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor with a shatter that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Champagne splashed onto his Italian leather shoes, but he didn't notice. He stared. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear a vision he thought must be a hallucination. He was looking at the father he had thrown into the mud 48 hours ago. But he wasn't seeing the beggar. He was seeing a ghost draped in $15,000 of vicuna wool. Vanessa gasped, dropping her clutch. Greg choked on his scotch. Terrence's shock lasted only a second. Then it was replaced by a rage so pure it distorted his features. He didn't see the quality of the suit. He didn't see the power in my stride. He only saw disobedience. He saw a stain that had refused to be washed away. He saw his father and his failure of a brother crashing his moment of glory. He jumped off the low stage and marched across the dance floor, pushing a senator out of his way without apologizing. His face was red, his veins bulging in his neck. "Security," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Security, get in here!" The crowd parted, forming a wide circle around us. We met him in the center of the room. Terrence stopped 3 feet away from me, breathing hard. He looked at Jordan, then at Emily, then finally at me. His eyes were full of hate. "You have some nerve," he hissed, spit flying from his mouth. "You stole those clothes, didn't you? You broke into a store. I knew you were a loser, Jordan, but dragging Dad into this criminal charade is a new low even for you." He turned to the crowd, raising his arms in a gesture of helpless exasperation, playing to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize," Terrence announced, his voice booming. "This is my mentally unstable father and my delinquent brother. They are clearly having a psychotic episode. They have become obsessed with my success. Please ignore them while I have them removed." He turned back to us, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Get out. Get out before I have you arrested for theft and trespassing. You look ridiculous. Do you think putting on a costume makes you one of us? You are trash. You will always be trash." Jordan stepped forward. He didn't cower. He didn't look down. He looked his brother in the eye. "We are not leaving, Terrence," Jordan said, his voice calm and steady. "We were invited." "Invited?" Terrence laughed, a manic, incredulous sound. "I own this room. I own this night. I own this city. You are not invited to anything. You are uninvited from my life." He looked at Emily, who was standing tall and proud. "And you," he sneered at her. "Did you scrub the hospital smell off before you put on that dress? You can dress a pig in silk, but it is still a pig." That was it. Jordan's hands balled into fists. But Terrence was faster. He raised his hand. He was going to slap Jordan. He wanted to physically hurt him, to put him back in his place, to assert his dominance in front of his donors. He wanted to humiliate him one last time. I saw the muscles in his arm tense. I saw the violence in his eyes. I prepared to step in, but I didn't have to. A blur of motion came from the side. Mr. Sterling, the general manager of the Grand Hotel, a man who usually moved with the slow dignity of a diplomat, sprinted across the floor. He intercepted Terrence's arm in mid-swing. Sterling caught Terrence's wrist. He didn't just catch it. He gripped it with a force that made Terrence yelp in pain. "Excuse me, Mr. Carter," Sterling said, his voice ice-cold and loud enough to carry to the back of the room. "You will not touch him." Terrence looked at the manager in shock. He tried to yank his hand away, but Sterling held on. "Do you know who I am?" Terrence shouted, his face purple. "Let go of me. I rented this ballroom. I am the client. I spend thousands here. Fire this man immediately. I want him and these beggars thrown out on the street." Sterling released Terrence's hand, pushing him back slightly so he stumbled. Sterling straightened his own jacket, brushing off the contact as if he had touched something filthy. He turned his back on Terrence, completely dismissing him. He faced me. He bowed. It wasn't a nod. It was a deep, respectful bow from the waist, the kind reserved for royalty or heads of state. "Good evening, Mr. Chairman," Sterling said, his voice ringing with deference. "Welcome to the Grand Hotel. Is everything to your satisfaction?" The silence in the room changed. It went from confused to stunned. Terrence froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Vanessa took a step back, clutching Greg's arm. Chairman Terrence whispered, "What are you talking about, Sterling? He is a homeless old man. He is broke. He is senile." Sterling turned back to Terrence. He looked at him with the disdain one reserves for a cockroach on a wedding cake. "Mr. Jefferson Carter is not homeless," Sir Sterling said, clipping his words. "And he is certainly not broke. As of 9 o'clock this morning, he is the sole owner of the Grand Hotel Group. He bought the entire chain. Cash." The gasp from the crowd sucked the air out of the room. "He bought it," Terrence stammered, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Yes," I said, speaking for the first time. My voice boomed, filling the silence. "I bought the building, Terrence." I took a step toward him. He took a step back. "I bought the land you are standing on. I bought the walls that are sheltering you. I bought the chandeliers you are standing under. I bought the wine you just spilled on the floor." I stepped closer. He shrank back, looking small and pathetic in his expensive suit. "You said you own this room," I said, my voice hard as granite. "You own nothing. You rented this room with money I put in your trust fund. You are standing on my floor wearing a suit paid for by my dividends, drinking my champagne." I looked at Vanessa. She was trembling, her face pale under her heavy makeup. "And you, Vanessa," I said, "you were worried about your rug. You were worried I would stain your reputation. Well, look around." I swept my arm across the room, encompassing the senators, the business tycoons, the elite of the city who were watching me with awe. I am the reputation, I roared. I am the money. I am the power you have been worshiping your entire life. I built the ladder you climbed, and you didn't even recognize me when I knocked on your door. I turned back to Terrence. I leaned in close so only he could see the fire in my eyes. You wanted security, I asked. You wanted me removed. I turned to Sterling. Mr. Sterling. Yes, Mr. Chairman. Get this man out of my hotel, I said, pointing at Terrence. And his sister, and her husband. Remove them immediately, they are trespassing. But Dad, Vanessa cried, stepping forward, tears streaming down her face. Dad, wait. We didn't know. Security, Sterling barked. 6 guards materialized from the edges of the room. They weren't the rented campaign security, they were hotel security. They moved on my command. They grabbed Terrence by the arms. They grabbed Greg. One of them took Vanessa's elbow. This is a mistake, Terrence screamed as they dragged him backward. Dad, tell them. Tell them who I am. I watched him being hauled away, his heels dragging on the polished floor. I know exactly who you are, I said softly. You are a stranger. The doors slammed shut behind them. The party was over for them. But for me and my real son, it was just beginning. The silence that followed Mr. Sterling's declaration was absolute. It was a physical weight pressing down on the ballroom, suffocating the jazz music and the polite chatter. The air conditioning hummed like a distant storm, but no one moved. All eyes were fixed on me. They were looking at the man they had assumed was a vagrant, a beggar, a stain on the pristine fabric of their evening. Now they were looking at him as if he were a god who had just descended from Olympus. Vanessa was the first to break the paralysis. Her brain could not process the information. It rejected the reality that was standing right in front of her. She let out a laugh. It was a high-pitched, shrill sound that grated against the nerves like glass grinding on stone. It was the laugh of a woman on the edge of hysteria. "You have got to be kidding me!" Vanessa shrieked, looking around at the guests, as if inviting them to share in the joke. "This is ridiculous." Dad, did you win the lottery? Is that it? Did you buy a scratch-off ticket with the money Terrence threw at you? She pointed a trembling finger at my bespoke suit. That is it, isn't it? You won some cash and now you are playing dress-up. You are trying to embarrass us one last time before you blow it all on bad investments again. Greg laughed too, but it was a nervous choking sound. He looked at Sterling, hoping the manager would smile and say it was all a prank, but Sterling did not smile. Sterling stood at attention, his eyes fixed on the floor, awaiting my next command. I did not answer Vanessa. I did not look at her. I walked past her. I walked past Terrence, who was still frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I walked past Greg, who shrank away from me, clutching his glass of scotch like a life preserver. I ascended the 3 steps to the low stage where the band had been playing. The lead singer, a young woman in a sequined dress, stepped back respectfully, handing me the microphone, without me even having to ask. I took it. The weight of the metal in my hand felt familiar. It felt like a weapon. I tapped the microphone once. The sound boomed through the ballroom speakers, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. It was the sound of authority. It was the sound of judgment. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the city's elite, the movers and shakers, the people Terrence had spent years trying to impress. They were all looking at me, waiting. I did not win the lottery. Vanessa, I said, my voice amplified, clear and cold as liquid nitrogen. I do not gamble. I build. I walked to the center of the stage. My name is Jefferson Carter. Most of you know me as the reclusive father of your candidate here. Some of you know me as the old man you stepped over in the street. But in the boardrooms of New York and London, I am known by a different title. I am the founder and majority shareholder of Carter Logistics. A gasp rippled through the room. Carter Logistics was not just a company. It was the spine of the American supply chain. It was the invisible giant that moved everything from food to fuel across the continent. I turned my gaze to Greg. He was pale, his skin looking waxy under the crystal lights. "Greg," I said, addressing him directly, "you have been bragging all night about a potential contract with North American Distribution. You told everyone it would make your career. You told my daughter it would buy her a summer home in the Hamptons." Greg nodded dumbly, unable to speak. "North American Distribution is a wholly owned subsidiary of Carter Logistics," I said, letting the words land like hammer blows. "I reviewed your proposal on my tablet this morning while I was sitting in my son Jordan's apartment eating toast." I paused, letting the tension build. "It was mediocre, Greg. Your margins are padded and your logistics are outdated. I rejected it at 8:45 this morning. You do not have a contract. You do not have a partnership. You have a rejection letter sitting in your email right now. Greg dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound sharp and violent. Whiskey splashed onto Vanessa's silver dress, but she didn't even notice. She was staring at me, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. I turned my attention to Terrence. He was shaking his head slowly, mumbling to himself. "No," he whispered. "No. That is impossible. You are broke. I saw the foreclosure notices. I saw the bank letters. I forged them, Terrence," I said. "It cost me $500 to print some fake stationery. It cost you your soul to believe them." I took a step closer to the edge of the stage, looking down at my eldest son. "You call yourself a self-made man, Terrence. You tell your voters you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. You run a hedge fund that manages $50 million. You think you are a financial genius." I laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. "Let us talk about the Atlas Fund, your flagship product. The fund that launched your career. You secured a $10 million seed investment 5 years ago from a mysterious angel investor group in the Cayman Islands. You thought they saw your potential. You thought they believed in your vision." Terrence looked up at me, his eyes filled with fear. "That was me," I roared. The crowd erupted in whispers. "I created the shell company, Terrence. I funded your startup. I have been injecting capital into your business every time you made a mistake, every time you were about to go under. I have been propping you up for a decade. You are not a genius son. You are an allowance kid. And you just tried to evict the man who signs your paychecks." Terrence fell to his knees. It wasn't a figure of speech. His legs actually gave out. He collapsed onto the polished floor, destroying the crease in his pants, ruining the image of the strong leader he had cultivated for years. He looked small. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing from the cookie jar, only to find out the jar was empty. But I wasn't done. I had destroyed their egos. Now I had to destroy their greed. I signaled to the audiovisual technician in the back of the room. I had sent him a file 10 minutes ago with instructions to play it on my signal. "Screen," I commanded. The massive projection screen behind the stage, which had been displaying Terrence's campaign logo and slogans, flickered. The image changed. It was a high-resolution scan of a legal document. The room went silent again as hundreds of eyes squinted to read the text. It was the document from yesterday, the release of liability, the severance of ties, the paper Terrence and Vanessa had paid a lawyer to draft, the paper they had forced Jordan to sign. I turned and pointed at the screen. "Do you recognize this?" I asked, my voice dropping to a conversational tone that was somehow more terrifying than the shouting. Vanessa put her hands over her mouth. A strangled sob escaped her throat. "This is a legal document," I explained to the audience, walking them through the evidence like a prosecutor. "It was drafted yesterday by my children Terrence and Vanessa. It states in clear legal terms that they refuse any financial responsibility for their father, Jefferson Carter. It states that they sever all ties. It states that they transfer all burdens of care to my youngest son, Jordan." I looked at Jordan. He was standing near the entrance to the ballroom holding Emily's hand. He was watching me with awe. He realized now what I had done. He realized that the humiliation of yesterday was actually a shield I had built to protect him. "You wanted to cut me off," I said to Terrence and Vanessa. "You wanted to make sure that my debts did not become your debts. You wanted to protect your assets from the mob. You wanted to make sure that when I died, you wouldn't have to pay for the funeral." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the original document. I held it up. "Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted." I unfolded the paper. "This document does more than protect you from my imaginary debts. It triggers a clause in my living trust. Clause 4A. In the event of a voluntary legal severance initiated by a beneficiary, said beneficiary forfeits all claims to the estate trust and future earnings of Jefferson Carter." I let the words hang there. I let them sink into the greedy minds of my children. "You signed it," I said. "You were so eager to run away from a $50,000 problem that you signed away a 9-figure inheritance. You didn't just disown a father, you disowned a fortune." Vanessa screamed. It was a primal sound of pure materialistic agony. She lunged forward toward the stage, her high heels slipping on the spilled whiskey. "No," she wailed, clawing at the air. "No, Daddy, please. We didn't read it. We didn't know. It was a mistake. We love you, Daddy. We were just scared." Scared, I asked. You were not scared for me. You were scared for your rugs. You were scared for your parties. You were scared for your image. I looked at Terrence. He was staring at the floor, tears streaming down his face. He wasn't crying for me. He was crying for the loss of his power. He knew what this meant. Without my backing, his fund would collapse. Without the inheritance, his campaign was dead. He was finished. You called your brother a loser, I said, gesturing to Jordan. You mocked him for living in the slums. You mocked him for being a teacher. You forced him to sign this paper thinking you were dumping your garbage on him. I smiled. It was a smile of pure vindication. But you were not dumping garbage. You were handing him the keys to the kingdom. I signaled to Braxton, who was standing in the wings of the stage. He walked out carrying the briefcase. He placed it on the podium. He opened it. The camera zoomed in on the briefcase, projecting the contents onto the big screen. It was a check. A single, oversized check like the ones they give out to lottery winners, but this one was real. It was drawn on the account of Carter Global Holdings. The amount was written in bold black letters, $55 million. The payee name was printed clearly, Jordan Carter. The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. $55 million, immediate liquid assets. It was more money than Terrence had raised in his entire campaign. It was more money than Greg would make in 10 lifetimes. I picked up the check. Jordan, I called out. Come up here, son. Jordan hesitated. He looked at Emily. She nodded, pushing him gently. He walked through the crowd. The sea of people parted for him. They looked at him with new eyes. They didn't see a poor teacher in a stolen suit. They see a multimillionaire. They saw power. He walked up the steps to the stage. He stood before me. He looked at the check, then he looked at me. Dad, he whispered, I don't want this. I just wanted you to be safe. I know, son. I said, my voice softening for the first time. That is why you deserve it. That is why you are the only one who can be trusted with it, because you didn't ask for it. I handed him the check. Take it, I said. Build the school you always talked about. Buy the hospital Emily works at. Do whatever you want. It is yours. Jordan took the check. His hands were trembling. Vanessa let out a howl of rage. She scrambled up the steps, her face twisted into a mask of greed. That is mine, she screamed, reaching for the check. That is my money. I am the daughter. I am the oldest girl. You cannot give it to him. He is nobody. She grabbed for the paper, her fingernails hooking into the corner. Security, I barked into the microphone. The hotel security team, who had been waiting for my signal, moved in. They intercepted Vanessa before she could tear the check. They grabbed her arms, restraining her. Get off me! She shrieked, kicking and spitting. I am Vanessa Carter Wright. I own this town. You own nothing, I corrected her. Greg ran to the stage, not to help his wife, but to beg. He fell to his knees in front of me, grabbing the hem of my trousers. Jefferson, please, he blubbered, tears running into his beard. I was pressured. Terrence made me do it. Vanessa made me do it. I respect you. I always respected you. Please don't cut us off. We have a mortgage. We have leases. We will be ruined. I looked down at him. I remembered the air freshener. I remembered the way he looked at me like I was a disease. You were not pressured, Greg, I said, kicking my leg free of his grasp. You are a coward and a bully, and bullies only respect one thing: force. I looked at Terrence. He had not moved. He was still kneeling on the floor, staring at the screen, staring at the document that had ended his life. Terrence, I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. You wanted to be a politician. You wanted to serve the public. Well, here is your first lesson in public service. Transparency. I turned to the audience. My son Terrence has been running his campaign on a platform of fiscal responsibility. He claims to be a man of the people. But tonight you have seen the truth. He is a man who would throw his own father into the gutter to save a poll number. Is that who you want representing you? Murmurs of no and never rippled through the crowd. Donors were already pulling out their phones, canceling checks, distancing themselves. The political fallout was instantaneous. His career was dead before the night was over. But I wasn't finished. I had one more hammer to drop. The legal hammer. Braxton, I said, show them the rest. Braxton pulled another document from the briefcase. Terrence, I said, I had my team audit your fund this morning. The audit was comprehensive. We found the $2 million you siphoned from the charity account. The money meant for the inner-city scholarship program. You used it to pay for your campaign ads." Terrence looked up, his face gray. "You audited me," he whispered. "I own the fund, Terrence," I said. "Of course I audited you." "And I found the theft," I pointed to the back of the room. And so did they. The doors opened again. This time it wasn't waiters or guests. It was the police. Uniformed officers and detectives in cheap suits walked onto the ballroom floor. They headed straight for Terrence. "Embezzlement is a felony, son," I said, "and stealing from charity. That is a special kind of low, even for you." The officers pulled Terrence to his feet. They pulled his arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was loud in the silent room. "Dad," Terrence cried out as they began to march him away. "Dad, help me, please." "You can fix this. You have the money. Pay them off." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had sold my truck for. "I cannot fix you, Terrence," I said. "I tried for 40 years. Now it is the state's turn." I watched them drag him away. I watched Vanessa being escorted out by security, still screaming about her rights. I watched Greg weeping on the floor, a broken man. I turned to Jordan. He was holding the check, looking at the carnage of his family with tears in his eyes. He wasn't happy. He wasn't gloating. He was mourning the brother and sister he had lost. I put my arm around him. "It is over, son," I said. "The rot is gone. Now we can rebuild." Jordan looked at me. "They are gone, Dad," he whispered. "Yes," I said, "but we are here, and we are going home." I led him off the stage. The crowd parted for us in silence. We walked out of the ballroom, leaving the ruins of the fake life behind us. We walked into the night where the air was clean and the future was ours to write. Mr. Braxton stepped into the center of the stage. He moved with the slow, deliberate gravity of a man who knew he held the power of a lightning bolt in his hands. He placed the leather briefcase on the podium. The room was so quiet that the click of the brass latches sounded like pistol shots echoing off the marble walls. Click, click. He lifted the lid. He did not reach in for a stack of cash. He did not reach in for deeds or titles. He reached in and pulled out a single slip of paper. It was an oversized presentation check, the kind used for lottery winners or charity galas, but this one carried the watermark of a Federal Reserve Bank. He walked past me. He walked past Terrence, who was still being restrained by the security guards. He walked straight to Jordan. My youngest son stood there in his new suit, looking like a man who had been caught in a whirlwind. He was holding Emily's hand so tight his knuckles were white. He watched the lawyer approach with trepidation. He still expected a bill. He still expected a debt. He had lived his life waiting for the other shoe to drop, and he was terrified this was it. "Mr. Jordan Carter Braxton," said his voice projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. "As the executor of the Carter Living Trust, it is my distinct honor to present you with this." He handed the check to Jordan. Jordan took it. He looked down. He blinked. He looked at Emily. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. Jordan looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. "Dad," he whispered, "what is this?" "Read it, Jordan." I said, my voice steady. "Read the amount." Jordan looked back at the check. He swallowed hard. $55 million, he read. His voice shook so hard the words barely came out. The crowd erupted. It wasn't a ripple of whispers this time. It was a roar, a collective shout of disbelief and awe. $55 million. It was a number that changed reality. It was a number that altered gravity. Braxton turned to the audience, raising his hand for silence. He waited until the room quieted down. "This sum represents the net proceeds from the sale of the Carter Logistics proprietary routing algorithm," Braxton announced. "A technology patent developed by Mr. Jefferson Carter 20 years ago and sold this morning to a global shipping conglomerate." He turned back to Jordan. "And effective immediately, the entirety of this sum, along with all liquid assets in the Carter estate, belongs solely to you." He paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. "Under the terms of the revised living will and the legal documents signed yesterday by your siblings, you are the sole beneficiary." Terrence Carter and Vanessa Carter Wright voluntarily signed affidavits renouncing all financial ties and claims to the estate of Jefferson Carter. In their haste to avoid a $50,000 debt, they legally severed themselves from a $55 million fortune. The irony hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The room turned to look at Terrence and Vanessa. They looked at the people who had thrown away a kingdom because they were afraid of a little dirt. Vanessa stared at the check in Jordan's hands. Her eyes were glazed over. She wasn't seeing her brother. She wasn't seeing a person. She was seeing the shoes she would never buy. She was seeing the houses she would never own. She was seeing her life of luxury dissolving into smoke. Something inside her snapped. The veneer of the socialite cracked, and the feral greed underneath clawed its way out. "No," she screamed. It was a sound of pure madness. She broke free from the security guard who was holding her elbow. She didn't run to me. She didn't run to beg for forgiveness. She ran for the money. "Give it to me!" she shrieked, lunging at Jordan. "That is mine! I am the daughter. I am the oldest girl. You cannot give it to him. He is nobody." She reached out her fingernails, hooked like talons, aiming for the check. She wanted to tear it. She wanted to eat it. She wanted to possess it. Jordan stepped back instinctively, shielding Emily and the check. He looked at his sister with horror. He had never seen this side of her. He had seen her cold. He had seen her mean, but he had never seen her rabid. Before she could reach him, a wall of muscle interposed itself. The head of my security detail, a man named Marcus, stepped in front of Jordan. He didn't strike her. He simply caught her by the shoulders, stopping her momentum cold. Vanessa flailed, kicking and spitting, her face twisted into a mask of ugly desperation. "Let me go," she screamed. "It is my money. Daddy, tell them. Tell them it is a mistake. I didn't mean to sign it. I didn't read it. It is not fair." She looked at me, her eyes wild. "Daddy, please. I am your princess. Remember. You called me your princess. You cannot give it to him. He is a teacher. He wears cheap shoes. He does not know how to spend it. I know how to spend it, Daddy. I know what to do with it." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had screamed about a rug while I begged for shelter. "You are right, Vanessa," I said, my voice cutting through her screams. "You know how to spend it. That is all you know how to do. You consume, you devour, you take. But you have never created a single thing in your life." I signaled to Marcus. "Get her off my stage." Marcus dragged her back. She dug her heels into the carpet, leaving skid marks, screaming obscenities that made the senators cover their ears. Greg watched his wife being hauled away. He looked at the check. He looked at the police officers standing by the door. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. The debt, the mortgage, the rejection letter from my company. He realized he was not just broke, he was ruined. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He collapsed. Greg fell to his knees. He crawled toward the edge of the stage. He didn't crawl to Jordan. He crawled to me. He grabbed the hem of my trousers, his expensive suit bunching up on the floor. Tears streamed into his beard. "Jefferson, please," he blubbered. "Please, I am sorry. I was pressured. You know how Vanessa is. You know how Terrence is. They made me do it. I wanted to help you. I swear. I wanted to let you sleep on the sofa, but they said no." He looked up at me, his face wet with snot and tears. "I respect you, Jefferson. I always respected you. You are a titan. Please do not cut us off. We have a mortgage. We have leases on the cars. We will be on the street. I cannot live on the street, Jefferson. I am not built for it." I looked down at him. I remembered the air freshener. I remembered the look of revulsion when he saw my wet coat. "You are right, Greg," I said, pulling my leg free from his grasp. "You are not built for the street. You are built for comfort. You are soft." I leaned down close to his face. "But you are going to learn, Greg. You are going to learn exactly what it feels like to have a door slammed in your face because you do not fit the aesthetic." I stood up and turned away from him. "Get him out of here," I ordered. 2 guards picked Greg up by his armpits. His legs dragged uselessly behind him as he sobbed, begging for mercy. Terrence was the only one left standing. He was still restrained by the guards near the entrance, but he had stopped struggling. He was staring at Jordan. His face was not twisted with greed like Vanessa's or fear like Greg's. It was twisted with a cold intellectual fury. His arrogance was a fortress that even reality could not breach. He looked at the check in Jordan's hand. He looked at the suit Jordan was wearing. He shook his head. "You are insane," he shouted across the room. His voice was hoarse but steady. "You are senile, old man. You have lost your mind." He pointed a shaking finger at Jordan. "Look at him. Look at him, Dad. He is a teacher. He makes $40,000 a year. He lives in the slums. He drives a truck that barely starts. He is a loser. He does not know the first thing about capital management. He does not know about tax shelters or diversified portfolios." Terrence laughed a harsh barking sound. "You are giving a nuclear weapon to a toddler. He will blow it all in a year. He will give it away to his charity cases. He will be broke again in 6 months because he has a poverty mindset. He is weak, Dad. He is soft. I am the one who built the fund. I am the one who knows how to wield power. I am the only one who can protect your legacy." He strained against the guards, his eyes bulging. "Give it to me, and I will double it in 3 years. Give it to him, and it is gone. Do not be stupid. Do not let your emotions destroy the business. He is just a poor teacher. He is nothing." The room fell silent again, waiting for my response. Terrence's words hung in the air, poisonous and sharp. He was appealing to the businessman in me. He was trying to use logic to cover his lack of soul. I walked to the edge of the stage. I looked at Terrence. I looked at the son I had sold my truck for. I looked at the son I had shielded from every hardship. "He is not just a teacher, Terrence," I said, my voice low and dangerous. I walked over to Jordan. I put my hand on his shoulder. I felt him trembling. I felt the weight of the check in his hand. "This man," I said, pointing to Jordan, "sold his wedding ring yesterday. He sold the symbol of his marriage to a pawnbroker for $65. I reached into my breast pocket. I pulled out the small cardboard box. I opened it and took out the gold band. I held it up. It caught the light of the chandeliers. It was a simple ring, scratched and worn, but in that moment it shone brighter than any diamond in the room. "He sold this to buy medicine for a man he thought was a dying beggar." I continued. "He didn't ask for a receipt. He didn't ask for interest. He didn't ask for a spot on the board of directors. He gave up his most precious possession to save his father." I turned to Terrence. "You asked for a disclaimer. You asked for a lawyer. You asked for protection from my debts. You saw a liability. He saw a human being." I took Jordan's hand. I slid the ring back onto his finger. It fit perfectly. Jordan looked at it, tears spilling down his cheeks. He looked at me with a gratitude that broke me. "You say he cannot manage money," I asked Terrence. "You say he is weak." I laughed. "You spent $10 million of my money to build a fund that barely breaks even. You spent $2 million of charity money to buy billboards with your face on them. You measure strength by how much you can take." I put my arm around Jordan. "He measures strength by how much he can give. He knows how to sacrifice. He knows how to love. He knows how to stand in the rain and open a door when everyone else is locking theirs." I looked Terrence dead in the eye. "He knows how to be a man, Terrence. You only know how to be a bank account, and a bank account can be emptied. A man cannot." Terrence opened his mouth to speak, to argue, to throw another insult, but nothing came out. He looked at Jordan. He looked at the ring. He looked at the check. And for the first time, he looked defeated. He realized that the game he was playing had rules he didn't understand. He realized that currency wasn't the only thing that had value. I turned to Braxton. "Finish it," I said. Braxton stepped forward. "There is one last matter regarding Mr. Terrence Carter," he said. Terrence looked up wary. "What now?" he spat. "You took my inheritance. You humiliated me. What else do you want?" "Justice," I said. Braxton opened the briefcase again. He didn't pull out a check. He didn't pull out a deed. He pulled out a thick file bound in red tape. "The audit," Terrence Braxton said. "The forensic audit of the Carter Charitable Foundation." Terrence went white. He stopped breathing. "The foundation you managed," Braxton continued, his voice ringing with legal doom. "The foundation funded by your father to provide scholarships for inner-city youth. I saw the $2 million discrepancy, Terrence," I said. "I saw the transfers to your campaign account. I saw the fake invoices. I saw the shell companies." Terrence started to shake. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, don't. Please. That is prison." "You stole from children, Terrence," I said. "You stole from kids like the ones Jordan teaches. You stole their future to buy your election." I pointed to the back of the room. "And that is a debt you have to pay." The doors opened. The police walked in. But the look on Terrence's face when he realized I wasn't just cutting him off but locking him up was the final payment I required. He had called Jordan a nothing. Now he was about to become a number in the system. Jordan looked at me. "Dad," he said softly, "you don't have to do this." I looked at my youngest son. His mercy was boundless. Even now he wanted to save the brother who had spit on him. "Yes, I do, son," I said, "because a man takes responsibility. And it is time Terrence learned how to be a man, even if he has to learn it in a cell." The room was suspended in a state of suffocating tension. The $55 million check was safely in Jordan's pocket, but the air was still thick with the static electricity of judgment. Terrence stood frozen, his face a mask of gray ash, staring at the police officers who had just entered the back of the ballroom. He looked at me, then at Braxton, then back at the officers. For the first time in his life, the arrogance that had shielded him like armor was gone. In its place was the raw, naked terror of a man watching the guillotine blade begin its descent. I nodded to Braxton. It was time to drop the final hammer. It was time to turn this family tragedy into a criminal proceeding. Braxton reached into the briefcase one last time. He did not pull out money. He did not pull out deeds. He pulled out a thick bound document with a red cover, the color of warning, the color of debt. He walked over to Terrence and held it up so the entire front row could see the title stamped in gold foil. Forensic Audit Carter Charitable Foundation. Terrence let out a strangled noise, a sound halfway between a sob and a retch. He knew what was inside that folder. He knew every line item, every faked invoice, every shell company he had created to siphon money away from the very people he claimed to help. I looked at my eldest son. I did not see the boy I had taught to ride a bike. I saw a thief in a $3,000 suit. "You thought I was just a silent partner, Terrence," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the silent room. "You thought because I let you run the foundation that I wasn't watching the books. You thought the old man was too busy counting his dividends to notice the discrepancies." I stepped closer to him, invading his personal space, forcing him to look at me. I noticed everything. I signaled to Braxton, read the summary. Braxton opened the file. His voice was dry and clinical, stripping away any dignity Terrence had left. Between January of last year and the present date, Mr. Terrence Carter authorized 47 transfers from the Carter Scholarship Fund to 3 offshore entities registered in the Cayman Islands. These entities, listed as consulting firms for educational outreach, provided no services. The funds were then routed back to domestic accounts controlled by the campaign to elect Terrence Carter. The crowd gasped. Stealing from a father was a family drama. Stealing from a scholarship fund for underprivileged children was a moral crime that turned the stomach of even the most cynical politician in the room. The total amount embezzled, Braxton continued relentlessly, is $2,150,000. $2 million, Terrence, I said, shaking my head. You stole $2 million from kids who needed books. You stole from kids who needed a chance, just so you could buy billboards with your face on them, just so you could throw parties like this. Terrence fell to his knees. He grabbed the fabric of my trousers, his hands shaking violently. "Dad, please," he begged, tears streaming down his face, ruining his spray tan. "It was a loan. I was going to pay it back. Once I got elected, once the donors came through, I was going to put it all back. Nobody would have known. Please, Dad, do not let them take me. I cannot go to prison. I am not built for prison." "You should have thought about that before you treated the charity account like your personal piggy bank," I said, cold and unmoving. I looked up at the police officers. They were waiting for my signal. They knew who I was. In this city, Jefferson Carter was not just a name, it was an institution. "Officers," I said, "do your duty." The detectives moved in. They did not be gentle. They grabbed Terrence by the arms, hauling him up from the floor. They pulled his hands behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed through the ballroom louder than any gunshot. Terrence screamed. It was a high, thin sound of pure despair. "Dad, help me. Vanessa, do something. Greg, help me." But Vanessa and Greg were shrinking back, trying to make themselves invisible, trying to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of Terrence's crimes. They watched as the officers marched Terrence toward the exit, his expensive shoes dragging on the carpet he had claimed to own just minutes ago. As Terrence disappeared through the double doors, I turned my gaze to the 2 remaining traitors, Vanessa and Greg. They were huddled together near the buffet table, looking like frightened rats on a sinking ship. They thought that because they hadn't embezzled charity money, they were safe. They thought that at worst they were just disinherited. They were wrong. I had saved a special kind of hell for them. "Greg," I said. He jumped. He looked at me, his eyes darting around, looking for an exit. "Yes, sir," he squeaked. "You like to gamble, Greg," I said, walking slowly toward them. "You like the high-stakes tables. You like the rush." Greg swallowed hard. "I do not know what you mean, Jefferson. I play a little poker. It is social." "It is not social, Greg," I corrected him. "It is pathological." I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was a promissory note, a dirty, wrinkled piece of paper that had been handed to my private investigator in a back alley 2 days ago. I know about the underground games in the warehouse district, Greg. I know about the loan sharks. I know you owe $300,000 to a man named Vinny. Vanessa turned to her husband, her eyes wide. $300,000, Greg. You told me you paid that off last year. He lied, Vanessa, I said. Just like he lied about the partnership. But that is not the worst part. I held up the paper. To get that loan, Greg needed collateral. But he didn't have any assets, so he used something else. He used my name. The room went deadly silent. Using the Carter name without permission was a death sentence in this town. He told them he was the son-in-law of Jefferson. Carter, I said, my voice low and dangerous. He told them I was backing him. He told them that if he couldn't pay, I would. He put a target on my back without my knowledge. Greg fell to his knees, joining the ghost of Terrence on the floor. I had to Jefferson, he sobbed. They were going to hurt me. I thought I could win it back. And you, Vanessa, I said, turning to my daughter. You knew he was drowning. So you tried to throw me an anchor. I pointed at the screen where a new document appeared. It was a mortgage deed. You forged my signature, Vanessa. You took out a second mortgage on the penthouse I bought for you. You leveraged my gift to pay for his addiction, and you stopped paying the bank 6 months ago. Vanessa went pale. How do you know that? Because I am the bank, Vanessa, I roared. Carter Financial Holdings bought the note on your penthouse 3 days ago. I own your debt. I own your mortgage. I own the roof over your head. I stepped closer until I was looming over them. You wanted to evict me? I asked. You wanted to call the police because I ruined your aesthetic. You gave me 5 minutes to get out of your foyer. I checked my watch. The platinum Rolex glinted in the light. I am more generous than you, I said. I am giving you 24 hours. Vanessa gasped. 24 hours for what? To vacate, I said. I am foreclosing. The eviction notice is being taped to your door right now. By this time tomorrow, the locks will be changed. Anything left inside becomes my property. But where will we go? Vanessa wailed. That is our home. We have nowhere to go. Go to a shelter, I said, throwing her own words back in her face. There are plenty of them downtown. Maybe this will teach you to be smarter with your money next time. I turned to the head of hotel security. Mr. Marcus, I said. Yes, Mr. Chairman. These two are trespassing. But before you throw them out, I want to make sure they do not leave with any of my property. Vanessa clutched her diamond necklace. This is mine, she shrieked. You gave this to me for my birthday. I gave it to a daughter who loved me, I said. That daughter does not exist anymore. And besides, you bought that with a supplementary credit card attached to my account. A card you were supposed to use for emergencies, not jewelry. I held out my hand. Give it to me. Vanessa hesitated. She looked at the security guard stepping forward. She looked at the crowd watching her with disdain. With trembling hands, she unclasped the necklace. She took off the diamond earrings. She slid the bracelets from her wrists. She dropped them into my hand. They felt cold and heavy. Now the watch, Greg, I said. Greg scrambled to undo the clasp of his gold watch. He handed it over, sobbing like a child. And the cards I added. They pulled out their wallets. They handed over the black credit cards, the platinum cards, the cards that had fueled their fake lives. I took a pair of scissors from Braxton's desk kit. I cut the cards in half right in front of their faces. The plastic snapped with a satisfying crunch. Your accounts are frozen, I said, dropping the pieces to the floor. Your assets are seized. Your credit is destroyed. You are walking out of here with nothing but the clothes on your backs. Vanessa looked down at her silver dress. She looked at her empty wrists. She looked at her husband, who was a weeping mess on the floor. She realized the party was truly over. You cannot do this, she whispered. We are your family. You signed a paper saying you are not. I reminded her. You wanted independence. Enjoy it. I signaled to the guards. Get them out. Security grabbed them. They didn't drag them like criminals. They escorted them like trash. They walked them through the parting crowd, through the lobby and out the front doors. I watched them go. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a heavy, hollow sadness. I had cut off my own limbs to save the body. I turned to Jordan. He was standing there holding Emily the check for $55 million still clutched in his hand. He looked terrified. He looked at me with wide eyes as if he didn't know who I was anymore. He had seen the monster I could be. He had seen the ruthlessness that built an empire. Dad, Jordan said, his voice shaking. That was brutal. It was necessary, son, I said, my voice softening as I looked at him. Cancer has to be cut out or it kills the patient. They were eating us alive, Jordan. They would have destroyed you. They would have taken that money and burned it. I walked over to him. I put my hands on his shoulders. I am not a monster, Jordan. I am a father who waited too long to discipline his children, and now the punishment had to match the crime. Jordan looked at the door where his siblings had vanished. Will they be okay? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. That is up to them. For the first time in their lives, they have to survive on their own merit. It might make them, or it might break them, but it is not our problem anymore. I put my arm around his shoulders. Come on, son, let's go home. The real home. We walked out of the ballroom. The music started up again, hesitant at first, then louder. The world was moving on. The king had returned. The usurpers were gone. Outside, the night air was cool. I looked up at the stars. I felt lighter. The secret was out. The burden was gone. I looked at the limo. Driver, I said, take us to the estate and stop for pizza on the way. My grandson is hungry. Leo cheered. Emily smiled, though her eyes were still wet. Jordan squeezed my hand. We got into the car. The door closed, shutting out the noise of the city. We were safe. We were together. And we were finally free. It has been 30 days since the night the world flipped upside down. Yesterday I stood on the sidewalk and watched the foreclosure auction sign being hammered into the lawn of what used to be Terrence's estate. It was no longer a monument to his vanity. It was just a building made of brick and mortar. I bought it back anonymously through a shell company. I did not buy it to live in. I donated the deed to the city this morning. It will be converted into a shelter for the homeless. The irony is sweet. The house Terrence used to hide his shame will now be a refuge for the people he despised. Tonight, the air is different. I am sitting at the head of a long oak table in a farmhouse estate on the outskirts of the city. It is not a palace of gold and marble. It is a home built of warm wood and stone surrounded by apple orchards. It is the kind of place Emily always dreamed of. The smell of roast chicken and fresh bread fills the room. My grandson Leo runs past me chasing a golden retriever puppy. He is laughing. His laughter is loud and clear. There is no wheeze in his chest. There is no gasping for air. The best pulmonary specialists in the country treated him last week. They threw away the cheap inhalers and gave him a future. Watching him run is worth every penny of the $55 million. Jordan sits to my right. He is not wearing a bespoke suit. He is wearing a simple flannel shirt and jeans. The money did not change him. It only amplified who he already was. He did not quit his job. He did not buy a Ferrari. Yesterday he showed me the blueprints for the new science wing at the inner city high school where he teaches. He is using his inheritance to rebuild the roof that was leaking on his students. He established the Carter Scholarship Fund to replace the one his brother stole from. He is going to teach history in a classroom built with his own generosity. Emily sits to my left. She is glowing. She resigned from her night shift at the hospital, but she did not stop working. She is opening a free clinic in the neighborhood we just left. She says that healthcare should not depend on a zip code. She is the heart of this family. We eat, we talk, we laugh. There is no tension. There are no secret agendas. There is no one calculating the cost of the wine or the value of the rug. There is just peace, the peace of people who have nothing to hide. After dinner, I walk out onto the back porch. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I sit in a rocking chair with a cup of tea. The evening is quiet. I reach into my pocket and pull out 2 pieces of paper. The first is a letter that arrived from the county jail this morning. The handwriting is shaky. It is from Terrence. He writes about regret. He writes about how hard prison is. He begs for a lawyer. He asks for money for the commissary. He calls me Dad. The second is a printout of a text message from Vanessa. She sent it from a prepaid phone. She is staying at a motel on the highway. She says Greg left her. She says she is working at a nail salon, but it is not enough. She asks for rent money. She says she learned her lesson. I look at the papers. I feel a phantom pain in my chest, the echo of the love I once had for them. But then I remember the rain. I remember the garage. I remember the air freshener and the look of disgust in their eyes when I needed them most. I strike a match. I hold the flame to the corner of Terrence's letter. The paper curls and blackens, turning to ash. I do the same with Vanessa's message. I drop them into the stone fire pit and watch them burn until there is nothing left but dust. I take a sip of my tea. I look through the window at my son Jordan holding his wife and child. I have learned the truth. Family is not blood. It is not a name on a birth certificate. Family is who stays when the storm hits. Family is who opens the door when you have nothing to offer but yourself. I close my eyes and rock back in the chair. I am Jefferson Carter. I lost 2 children to greed, but I found one in the wreckage, and that is a profit margin I can live with. I spent 40 years building an empire thinking wealth was measured in square footage and stock portfolios. I was wrong. True wealth is not what you have in the bank, it is who sits beside you when the bank is closed. My older children chased the shadow of my money and lost the light of my love. Jordan didn't care about the shadow, so he inherited the sun. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Look around your table tonight. Who would feed you if you had nothing? Who would open the door if you smelled like rain and failure? Keep those people close. They are your real fortune. Everything else is just paper and dust. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more life-changing stories. Let me know in the comments, would you have forgiven Terrence and Vanessa, or did they get exactly what they deserved? I will be reading your answers.